I grew up in the suburbs of a small town called Riverbend, in a house on the edge of a dense forest. My father, a Marine sergeant, was often away, while my mother worked as a librarian in the local library. The library became my second home, where I would spend hours immersed in books. From a young age, I loved nature. My father often took me on hikes through the woods, where we would spend weekends tracking wild animals and learning how to survive in the wilderness. He taught me how to build fires, read animal tracks, and find my way even in the most tangled thickets. It was an unforgettable time. After finishing school, I enrolled in university to study ecology. That's where I met Tom Blackburn. He was born and raised in a small town in the Appalachians. His grandfather was a shaman and taught him everything he knew about nature and spirits. After his parents passed away, Tom moved in with his grandfather, who raised him and passed on his knowledge. We met under rather unusual circumstances. In my first year at university, I joined a nature club that organized hikes and expeditions. One day we went to the forest to study the local flora and fauna. The group consisted of students, each passionate about their field. I lagged behind, trying to photograph a rare bird, and got lost. The sun was already beginning to set, and I started to worry that I wouldn't be able to find my way back. Suddenly, I heard quiet footsteps and turned around. There stood Tom, who, as it turned out, was also a member of the club. He calmly said, "You seem to be lost. Come on, I'll show you the way." He confidently led me through the forest, talking about the local plants and animals. His knowledge and confidence made a great impression on me. On the way, we struck up a conversation and quickly found common ground, discussing our interests. From then on, we became close friends. In the summer of our second year, Tom invited me to spend a couple of weeks in his hometown in the Appalachians. I gladly accepted, as it was a great opportunity to learn more about his life and traditions. We began our journey in Tom's old but reliable pickup truck. The road was long and winding, but the trip was fascinating. We drove through dense forests, small villages, and endless fields. When we finally arrived in his hometown, I was struck by its seclusion and beauty. The town was small, with a population of no more than 200 people. Mostly it consisted of old houses, surrounded by green hills and dense forests. The main street had a few shops, a post office, and a small school. Tom's family was the only Native American family in the town, and they had lived there for several generations. We drove up to Tom's house, which was on the edge of town, near the forest. The house was wooden, 2-story, with a covered porch and a blooming garden. It looked cozy and welcoming, although it was clear it could use a little repair. Tall trees grew around the house, and a small stream flowed nearby. Tom's grandfather met us on the porch. He was a tall and lean old man with a wrinkled face and piercing eyes. His gray hair was braided into a long plait, and he wore a necklace with a bear-tooth amulet. He smiled when he saw us and said he had been waiting for our arrival. "Welcome, Jack," he said, extending his hand to me. "I'm Samuel Blackburn, but you can call me Sam. Tom has told me a lot about you." We went inside the house. Inside it was cozy and warm, with wooden walls and ceilings decorated with old Native American artifacts and family photos. In the center of the living room was a large fireplace, surrounded by soft chairs and a sofa. In the corner stood a bookshelf, among which I noticed many books on ecology and natural science. Sam offered us some tea, and we sat at a large wooden table in the kitchen. He began to tell stories about his youth, the traditions of his people, and how they try to preserve their culture in this small town. Here is one of his stories about the origin of their people. Long ago, at the beginning of human existence, The Warao lived in a beautiful land high above the skies. Besides the Warao, this paradise was inhabited only by birds, which the young men of the tribe hunted. One day, a young man named Okonote was chasing a bird. He shot an arrow, but it missed its target and disappeared. Okonote searched and searched for the arrow and stumbled upon a hole it had fallen into. He looked inside and saw the earth below, a world teeming with herds of wild boars, countless deer, and other animals, unbothered by anyone, roaming green forests and savannas. The hole in the sky was wide enough, and Okonote decided to weave a ladder out of cotton fibers to descend to the ground. Following the hero, all the Indians descended from the sky, and soon they had to regret this adventure. The plumpest woman of the tribe, descending last, completely plugged the hole and deprived her people of the opportunity to return to the promised heavens. Deciding that the risks of a rescue operation were too high, the Warao decided to leave her stuck as she was. I listened attentively to all the old man's legends, sometimes making notes. The days passed peacefully. Gradually, I got to know the town. It was a charming place with quiet streets and friendly residents. A family friend, Joe Williams, often visited the house. He was an old friend of Sam's, with whom he had shared many adventures. He was a massive man with a thick beard and eyes full of life. Joe often dropped by for tea, telling stories about forest expeditions and old times. He was a treasure trove of knowledge about the local flora and fauna. A week passed. Tom and I explored the surroundings and enjoyed nature every day. On Saturday morning, we decided to go back to the forest to spend the whole day there. I woke up early, as the sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, filling the room with a soft golden light. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and herbal tea that Samuel was preparing. Tom was already up, packing backpacks with food and water. "Good morning, Jack," Tom said cheerfully when he saw me in the kitchen. "Today we're going to an old hunting camp my grandfather found." We quickly had breakfast, thanked Sam for his care, and left the house. The morning was cool but sunny, and the forest seemed to come alive around us. Birds sang their morning songs, and the air was fresh and clean. We walked along a path that led deep into the forest. Dry leaves crunched underfoot, and the scent of pine and wild mint filled the air. Tom told me stories about the places we passed through and how his grandfather used them for hunting and shamanic rituals. The forest was full of life. We saw squirrels running along tree branches and heard the distant tapping of a woodpecker. After we had walked a few miles, the trail narrowed, and the trees around us began to thicken. Suddenly, Tom stopped and raised his hand, pointing ahead. I looked in that direction and saw two men holding rifles. Tom said they were the Hanson brothers, Bob and Jim. They looked grim, their faces stern and eyes wary. Bob, the older of the two, with a sturdy build and rough features, was carefully scanning the surroundings. Jim, slightly less muscular but still intimidating, held his rifle at the ready. "Hey, Big Chief, what brings you out here so early?" Bob asked in a gruff voice, not lowering his rifle. "Good morning, Bob, Jim," Tom replied, trying to speak calmly. "We just decided to take a walk in the forest. I hope we're not disturbing your hunting route?" "Watch where you're going," Jim said, his voice tense. "And don't get underfoot." Tom and I exchanged glances, understanding that it was best to keep our distance. Their aggressive behavior and sullen demeanor were not reassuring. Tom nodded to them and we continued on our way, trying not to show our concern. When we were a safe distance away, I asked Tom, "What's wrong with them? Why are they so tense?" "The Hanson brothers have always been like that," Tom replied. "They love hunting and don't have much respect for others. The best we can do is stay away from them." We were about to leave when we heard one of the brothers shout. Bob was yelling to Jim that he had found something interesting. Intrigued, we moved closer and saw that they had discovered the entrance to a den under a large tree. The entrance was surrounded by roots, forming a natural barrier. A strange blue smoke was slowly rising from the den and dissipating into the air. We couldn't understand what this smoke was or where it was coming from. The brothers were excited about their discovery. Bob took a long stick and started poking into the hole. At that moment, we heard a terrifying roar, and a huge bear emerged from the den. She attacked the brothers furiously, defending her territory. Tom and I stood in shock, not knowing what to do. Bob, wasting no time, shot his rifle. The bear roared in pain, but did not retreat. Jim joined his brother, and a hail of bullets rained down on the animal. After several shots, the bear fell dead. The brothers stood, shocked by their deed, looking at the dead bear. A few moments of silence passed when suddenly another roar came from the den. This sound was even more frightening and chilling. Something emerged from the dark entrance, holding 2 small bear cubs. We didn't have time to see what it was, but it looked horrifying. Its eyes burned with fury and pain. The creature gave us a furious look and in just a few moments disappeared into the dense foliage of the forest. We stood in shock, unable to move, realizing that we had just witnessed something completely incredible and terrifying. Soon we came to our senses, and the brothers began to realize what they had done. According to state laws, killing a bear with cubs was punishable by a large fine and sometimes imprisonment. They stood over the body when Tom ran up to them and began scolding them for what they had done. But the brothers were silent, and instead of answering, they pointed their rifles at us. Tom was scared and, trying to calm the situation, said, "Guys, what are you doing? Calm down." Jim replied coldly, "No witnesses, no problems, Big Chief." Tom took a couple of steps back, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. "Wait," Tom said. "We won't tell anyone." The brothers looked at him, and the older one, Bob, with a threatening expression, said, "Okay, we'll let you go, but if we have any problems, I know where you live and where your grandfather lives." His words sounded like a death threat. Bob looked at us, holding his rifle at the ready, and said, "Now get lost." We didn't argue and quickly left. What the brothers did with the bear's body, we didn't know and didn't want to know. This shocking experience left us completely confused and scared. We decided to go back home. The path through the forest seemed endless, and the silence between us was heavy and tense. When we reached the house, Samuel met us at the door. Seeing our pale faces, he knew something had happened, but we didn't say anything. "Are you okay, guys?" Samuel asked, his piercing eyes looking straight at us. "Yes, just tired," Tom replied, trying to hide the fear in his voice. Samuel didn't press, but I knew he sensed something was wrong. We spent the rest of the day in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. In the evening, Tom and I sat on the porch watching the setting sun and trying to make sense of what had happened. A day passed, and the tension didn't leave us. But everything changed when one terrifying incident occurred. The day after the incident, we decided to go back to the forest. The mood was somber, but we knew a walk would help us clear our minds. After wandering through the forest for several hours, we began to feel a bit better. We enjoyed the sounds of nature, watched the birds, and made our way through thick undergrowth. When the sun started to set, we decided to head home. The trail we were on was familiar but still mysterious in the evening light. We walked in silence, enjoying the last moments of our journey, when suddenly we heard a crunch and rustling in the bushes. We tensed, freezing in place. Suddenly, something jumped out of the bushes and knocked Tom to the ground. I was terrified and rushed to help him. It was the creature we had seen before, but now it was even more furious and dangerous. I didn't have time to get a good look at it. It disappeared into the bushes again. Tom was injured in the arm, blood oozing from a deep scratch. "Tom, hold on!" I shouted, helping him up. We realized we had to run. The creature was chasing us, its heavy footsteps and growls getting closer. We raced along the trail, barely dodging branches and roots. The forest was getting darker, and our breathing was becoming more labored. Every moment I expected the creature to catch up with us. Its growling and ragged breathing grew louder, and it seemed it would grab us at any moment. At one point I turned and saw the furious eyes of the creature, burning with hatred and pain. Suddenly the chase stopped. We burst into a small clearing and froze, looking around in fear. The creature had disappeared, as if it had dissolved into the air. I looked around and noticed an amulet hanging on a tree. "That's an amulet," Tom said, breathing heavily. "Such amulets hang around our house and protect it." I realized that something supernatural had saved us, just as it had pursued us. But what was that creature? We couldn't figure it out. I helped Tom into the house and started administering first aid. Samuel wasn't home, and I tried to manage on my own. Fortunately, the wound wasn't too deep, but it still required medical attention. "We need to go to the hospital," I said, examining the wound. Tom nodded, and we quickly got ready. We got into the old pickup and drove to the hospital. The road wasn't long, we could have walked, but I didn't want to strain the injured Tom. The clinic was small, like the town itself. It was a one-story building with faded white paint and a red roof. An old sign hung at the entrance reading, "Medical Center." Rosemary and lavender bushes grew around the clinic, giving the place a special atmosphere of coziness and calm. We parked by the entrance and quickly helped Tom out of the pickup. The doctor, Dr. Drent, was waiting for us at the door. He was middle-aged, with gray hair and kind but tired eyes. His face expressed concern and professionalism. "What happened?" he asked, seeing the blood on Tom's arm. "We were in the forest and some creature attacked us," I began, helping Tom inside. "It was huge, and I'm not sure what it was." Dr. Drent looked at us skeptically. "It was probably a wolf or a wild dog," he said. "The forest is full of dangers. Let me see the wound." We entered a small office where the doctor sat Tom on a couch and began the examination. The room was bright and clean, with walls adorned with nature photographs and medical diplomas. In the corner stood a cabinet with medical instruments and medicines. Dr. Drent carefully cleaned the wound and bandaged it. Then he gave Tom a tetanus shot and some painkillers. "Your wound isn't too deep," said the doctor, "but you need to keep an eye on it to prevent infection. Take these antibiotics and come back in a couple of days for a follow-up." We thanked him and left the clinic. On the way back home, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Tom looked tired but held up bravely. "We're lucky it wasn't a serious wound," I said, looking at the road ahead. Tom only nodded, lost in his thoughts. When we got home, Samuel met us at the door. He immediately noticed Tom's bandaged arm and became alarmed. "What happened?" he asked, looking at us with concern. "It's okay, Grandpa," Tom replied, trying to reassure him. "Just a small wound. Dr. Harris said it'll heal." Samuel nodded, but his eyes remained worried. We went inside and sat in the kitchen, but we didn't have time to explain anything as Joe burst into the house. He was agitated and out of breath, his face full of extreme concern. "Sam!" he shouted as he stepped inside. "There's an emergency in town! Mark Wilson was attacked by some creature and got injured!" His words hit like a thunderbolt. Tom and I exchanged glances, knowing it was the same creature we had seen in the forest. "What happened?" Samuel quickly asked, moving toward Joe. How is he now? Mark's alive but badly injured. The news spread quickly through the town. Everyone's arming themselves because that creature could be anywhere, Joe said, glancing at us. Some say it's a wolf, others a bear, but no one knows for sure. Samuel said he had to go to town, and we volunteered to go too. Tom and I exchanged looks, understanding we needed to tell the whole truth. On the way to town, moving through the dark forest paths, we began to tell Samuel and Joe everything from the beginning. How we met the Hanson brothers, how they killed the bear, and what we saw afterward. The old man listened carefully, his face growing darker. By the end of the story, he was pale and deeply thoughtful. "It can't be," he muttered under his breath. "If it's really what I think it is." Soon we arrived in town, where a group of armed people had gathered by the town hall. They were talking among themselves, holding rifles and lanterns. The air was filled with tension and fear, people looking around, expecting another attack. We approached the group leader, an elderly man named Sheriff Harris, who was holding a rifle and giving directions. "What's going on here?" Samuel asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Samuel, glad you're here," said the sheriff, nodding. "Mark was attacked by some creature. We don't know what it is, but it's very dangerous. People are scared." We listened to the sheriff, and suddenly the silence of the night was broken by the sound of gunshots. They came from one of the houses near the town hall. Everyone turned in that direction, and at that moment a man started running toward us. I recognized him immediately. It was Bob Hanson. He was covered in blood, his face contorted with fear, and his hands trembling. We ran up to him, and Tom grabbed him by the shoulders, trying to calm him down. "Bob, what happened?" Tom asked, looking him straight in the eyes. At first, he couldn't string two words together, mumbling in fear. His eyes were wide open, and he was barely breathing as if he couldn't believe what had happened. Finally, after a moment, he managed to say, Jim is dead. That creature, it killed him." Everyone around froze, trying to comprehend what they had just heard. After a while, he came to his senses a bit and told us the details. "We were in the house," Bob began, his voice trembling. "And suddenly that creature attacked us. It broke through the window and grabbed Jim, sinking its teeth into his throat. I tried to stop it, but it was too fast and strong. I barely managed to shoot." The sheriff went to the scene with a few people and soon returned, saying the boy's body was missing. People around began to whisper, fear and panic spreading like wildfire. We stood in shock, realizing that the creature not only killed Jim but also took his body. "Everyone stays in their places," Sheriff Harris ordered, raising his hand to get everyone's attention. "We must be ready for any attack. Mike, take a head count. We need to gather everyone here. It's dangerous to be alone in the town." Soon all the residents gathered in the square in front of the town hall, discussing what to do next. Panic and fear hung in the air. Everyone was scared and confused. Suddenly the silence was broken by a terrifying roar coming from the forest. It was the same eerie sound we had heard before, but now it was much closer and louder. At that moment my grandfather Samuel stepped forward. His face was focused but firm. He raised his hand, drawing the attention of everyone gathered. "Listen to me," Samuel said loudly, overriding the noise. "We need to leave here and go to my house. I've hung amulets around it. They will help protect us." People looked at each other, their faces expressing doubt and skepticism. But when the creature roared again, the doubts began to fade. Sheriff Harris, who knew Samuel well and respected his wisdom, made a decision. "All right, Sam," he said, nodding. "We'll rely on you. Everyone listen up. We're heading to Samuel's house. Form a line, armed people on the perimeter, protecting the others. We quickly organized ourselves, with the townspeople carrying weapons standing on the edges of the group, and everyone else in the center. Slowly but steadily, we moved toward Samuel's house. The distance wasn't far, but each step felt like an eternity. Along the way, we heard rustling and movements in the bushes. The creature's roar echoed from the right, then the left, making everyone nervous and glance around. But fortunately, it did not attack. Perhaps it was held back by the crowd and the glow of the lanterns we carried. We moved quickly, trying to keep pace and not scatter. An oppressive silence surrounded us, broken only by our footsteps and occasional breaths. Sometimes it felt like the creature was very close, its sinister eyes hidden in the darkness. We continued our path through the dark forest, surrounded by the eerie sounds of the night. After a while, we saw an amulet hanging on one of the trees, and soon felt that the creature's roar was behind us. People calmed down a bit, realizing we were in the protected zone. When we reached the homestead, the tension began to ease. People settled down, some in the house, some in the garden, trying to catch their breath after the terrifying experience. Everyone knew they needed to decide what to do next. Sheriff Harris, looking over the gathered crowd, stood before us. "I've called for reinforcements," he said, his voice firm but tired. "But we'll have to wait. We need to be prepared for anything. Sam," he turned to my grandfather, "what do you know about this creature?" Samuel sat in the center of the circle formed by the residents and sighed, his face thoughtful and focused. "My people have a legend," he began, his voice deep and serious. "It's been passed down through generations. Once, among the dense northern forests, there lived a boy named Seago. His father had died, and little Seago was not yet able to hunt. Seago's mother remarried a man named Blackhorn, who believed his wife cared more for her son than for him. He decided to get rid of Seago. One day, Blackhorn told his wife that today Seago would go hunting with him. The mother pleaded with him not to take the boy, saying it wasn't his time yet, but she couldn't go against her husband. The hunter and the boy trudged through the impenetrable thicket for a long time. Seago was tired, his moccasins were torn, and his lips were dry, but the grim Blackhorn kept leading him further and further. The sun had already set behind the treetops when they approached the dark entrance of a cave. "Look for rabbits in there," the hunter said. Seago recoiled from the cave, saying he couldn't see anything in there. Blackhorn sneered and pushed the boy into the cave, blocking the entrance with large stones as soon as Seago disappeared into the darkness. Blackhorn thought no one would know where the boy had gone. But a swallow, perched on a tall pine, saw everything and flew to the kind Glooskap. Enraged, Glooskap thrust his spear into the hill that Blackhorn was walking on, and a heap of stones forever buried the man with a serpent's heart. Then wise Glooskap called upon a porcupine and ordered him to save Seago. In the cave, it was cold, and Seago, not hearing Blackhorn's call, stumbled toward the exit. Tears streamed down his face when he heard the quiet voice of the porcupine, who could speak to children. The porcupine said he would help Seago. He tried to push the stones away, but they were too heavy. Then the porcupine called out for help. In response came the wolf, the raccoon, the deer, the rabbit, flocks of birds, the squirrel, and the turtle. All the animals worked tirelessly. The deer left his antler under a boulder, many broke their claws and teeth. But Seago still sat in the darkness. Finally, a bear named Moonsquaw came to the clearing, scattering the stones with her strong paws, and soon Seago emerged into the light. The porcupine asked who would feed the boy, as the animals ate bark and leaves, which were not suitable for Seago. A robin brought a worm, a beaver, a piece of willow bark, and mooing squaw, a blueberry cake, which Seago ate. The porcupine suggested that mooing squaw take the boy in, and so Seago settled in the bear's den. The 3 furry cubs accepted him, and soon Seago forgot his former life among humans, feeling like a bear cub. In the spring, mooing squaw led them to the river, where they feasted on smelt. The bear caught fish, throwing them ashore for the cubs and Seago to eat. One day, mooing squaw sniffed the air and suddenly growled for everyone to run, as she had smelled humans. They hid deep in the den, and Seago learned that humans kill animals, so they must flee at the scent of people. The time for games grew less. The cubs and Seago woke before dawn to gather berries. One day they woke to find everything covered in fluffy white snow, and their winter den became the hollow of a fallen tree. Half the winter had passed, and it was dark, dry, and warm in the den. However, one day native hunters noticed steam rising from the hollow and guessed it was a bear den. Moon Squaw heard the voices of men and woke everyone, saying she would go out first to distract the hunters, and then everyone must run. She asked Seago to plead with the hunters not to kill his little sister. Moon Squaw emerged from the den and ran to the side, but the hunters killed her with arrows. 2 cubs managed to escape into the forest. Seago was the last to crawl out and immediately shouted that he was as human as they were and begged them not to kill the cub. The hunters lowered their bows in fear, and Seago told them his story. The hunters fed the cub and mourned the slain bear. All day, Seago wept over Moon Squaw's body and decided that his name would be Moon Son of the Bear, vowing never to hunt bears. "Perhaps that creature is Seago," the old man added. Everyone listened, captivated by Samuel's story. The silence that enveloped us was filled with fear and anticipation. Sheriff Harris, thoughtfully looking at my grandfather, asked, "So what do we need to do, Sam?" Samuel, after considering the answer for a moment, said, "We need to find the bear's body and bring it to the circle of shamans. There we will perform a ritual to calm the spirit." Everyone held their breath. Listening to this in broad daylight in safety might have seemed like nonsense, but it was night. The firelight danced on faces, and somewhere in the distance, the creature roared. These circumstances gave Samuel's words a sinister reality. Sheriff Harris, decisively nodding, went into the house and soon returned with Bob, who was still shaken by what had happened. "You need to show us where the bear's body is," the sheriff said, looking straight into Bob's eyes. Bob hesitated at first, but then he realized there was no other way. He nodded, and we began to prepare for the journey. Samuel decided to join us despite his age. Tom and I firmly stated that we would go as well. 4 experienced local hunters joined our group. They were armed to the teeth and ready for anything. We quickly gathered our gear, checked our weapons and flashlights, grabbed shovels, and headed into the forest. The road was dark and eerie. The forest seemed alive, its shadows moving and whispering in the wind. Rustling and the sounds of nocturnal animals accompanied us at every step. We moved quickly and quietly, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. We walked several miles, and Bob, tense and on edge, led us to the site. He pointed to a mound covered with dry leaves and branches. "It's under that mound," he said, his voice trembling. We quickly started digging, trying to work as fast as possible. Several people stood guard, weapons ready, listening intently to the sounds of the forest. Soon we uncovered the bear's body. It had begun to decompose, emitting an unpleasant smell that made us nauseous. We carefully placed it on the tarp we had brought. The carcass was incredibly heavy, and I wondered how those 2 had managed to carry it on their own. We hauled the carcass to a place known as the Circle of Shamans. Samuel led the way, showing us the path. Tom, the others, and I carried the body while the sheriff remained vigilant, watching for any signs of danger. We slowly made our way through the forest, each step feeling heavy. Suddenly we heard the familiar roar in the distance, and we realized the creature was approaching. "Faster!" Samuel urged us, not looking back. We quickened our pace despite our exhaustion. Sheriff Harris opened fire, trying to hold the creature back. His shots echoed through the night, giving the impression that the battle was right behind us. "Damn beast!" the sheriff cursed, firing at a shadow flitting between the trees. The roar grew louder, and I felt fear gripping my heart. We pulled the carcass with all our remaining strength, knowing that if we stopped, we'd all die. Finally, we reached the site. The circle of shamans was a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. In the center stood a stone circle, marked with ancient symbols and amulets hanging from the branches. "Place it here," Samuel commanded, pointing to the center of the circle. We carefully laid the bear's body on the ground. The sheriff, breathing heavily, took up a position at the edge of the circle, keeping his weapon ready. "Everyone inside the circle," Samuel ordered. "The amulets will protect us while I perform the ritual." We gathered around, holding our breath. The shaman began the ritual, and the sheriff stopped shooting, remaining alert with his rifle in hand. The old man was in a trance, his voice deep and mesmerizing as he chanted ancient words. A wind rose around us, and we heard whispers and mysterious voices mixed with the sounds of animals. I felt like I was in a trance myself, as if I were between sleep and wakefulness. Suddenly, I saw the creature. It stood outside the circle, staring at us with its furious eyes. The creature was enormous, with long, clawed limbs and black fur shrouded in darkness. Its eyes burned with rage and pain, and in their depths, I saw an insatiable thirst for revenge. Then there was a flash, and a mist enveloped us. I heard a terrifying roar coming from the bear's dead body. The sound made my knees buckle. The roar was piercing, as if it came from the very depths of the earth, and it seemed to penetrate my soul. Then there was silence. Everything calmed down, and the creature disappeared. We stood, holding our breath, realizing that the ritual had worked. Samuel collapsed to his knees, exhausted and drained. We rushed to help him, but he raised his hand to calm us. "It worked," he said, breathing heavily. "The spirit is at peace." We carefully lifted him and helped him stand. The realization that we had managed to deal with this terrible threat brought immense relief. The next morning, when we returned home, the state police had arrived. They surveyed the area but found no trace of the creature. The town gradually calmed down, people returning to their normal lives, but the fear and memory of what had happened lingered for a long time. A week later, I left, returning to my studies and other responsibilities. But Tom later told me that some people still occasionally hear that terrifying roar in the forest.
Story 2.
Hurry! Horses gallop at breakneck speed. A turn of the head reveals the dying embers of the sunset, surrounded by a cold winter desert. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to take cover. Ahead looms a large stone castle with towers, battlements, sentries, and fire. It burns brightly in the darkness, the last landmark. Behind, a blizzard advances, a winter storm, cold and fierce. The small group occasionally manages to break away, only to swirl in the snow mist, trying to escape winter's trap. But today, the situation has changed. Something dark and sinister lurks in the snowstorm. Something evil prowls among the trees, first scaring the members of the group, then taking away those who lag behind or isolate themselves. And then a gnawed corpse is found, making it clear that if they don't hurry, no one will reach safety. The danger spurs the small caravan into action, making the guards more diligent in their duties, constantly watching the surrounding forest, ready to spring into action and attack the enemy at any moment. Everyone knew what was following them. Everyone was ready to howl in despair, for the pursuers never retreated. The winter's biting wind clawed at the desperate faces, sharpening the grim expressions of the guards. And here it is, the final stretch. A straight road, horses racing at full speed. Death, cold, and darkness are behind. Spur the horses. Everyone knows that after sunset the gates will not open. A tradition, revived after so many years. People rush, picking up speed, ignoring those left behind. "The gates!" shouted the one in the lead. They made it. The gates were still open, just a little bit further. Behind us came a frantic, broken voice from the middle of the group. If anyone had turned around, they would have seen the pack of predators driving the group forward. Snowy dogmans, creatures from the depths of hell. 15 individuals, a large pack of deadly predators, shadows flying after the people. The gates. The cry rang out again, and the realization dawned on the people that they were dragging death with them, and how the people in the fortress would react to it. The gates lowered agonizingly slowly, giving the group a slim chance to make it. And then one of the horses stumbled. Its hoof fell into a hole, breaking with a crunch, letting out a plaintive whinny, throwing its rider, a young pregnant woman. She fell, disappearing into the snow, sliding down a small slope. "Evredeka!" An older man shouted desperately, holding his horse. Time was running out, and he understood they wouldn't make it. Neither the guards nor their companions stopped to help. Everyone raced past, leaving the pair alone with death. The man jumped from his horse, plunging into the snow, awkwardly moving his legs, and ran to his screaming wife. She had twisted her ankle. He scooped up his pregnant wife, dragging her upwards, knowing they would soon die. His half-mad scream echoed through the valley, urging both the survivors and the predators to quicken their pace. He hoisted his beloved onto the horse, kissed her on the lips, and struck the horse's flank, sending her towards the escaping group, while he turned to face death. He died before he could see the horse, at full gallop, crash into the wooden gates as his wife fell to the ground, crying out in pain and fear. From such a distance, he would have thought she was dead, but she wasn't. The gates lifted just enough for her to scramble inside. The horse was left to die. With a heavy thud, the gates came down, sealing the fortress town from the outer winter world for days, perhaps weeks, judging by the blizzard that howled beyond the town's edge. Did you hear how many there were? They say a few dozen. More than 50. And they brought all of this here? The merchants dragged them in. Is the pregnant woman alive at least? All these nerves because of a woman. The horse kept whinnying while those things devoured it. They descended like vultures, covering everything, those creatures. The chaotic murmur in the tavern rolled from corner to corner, rehashing the same topic. Such an impressive arrival of the merchants. The blizzard and snowy dogmans negatively affected both the newcomers and the town's residents. Now men and women were herded into barracks, where nurses and doctors would examine them for suspicious bites, scratches, and wounds. Anyone could be infected. Meanwhile, the goods were piled up in a common warehouse. Tonight the newcomers would spend under supervision, and tomorrow they could meet with the town's leader to decide what to do next. Even if the blizzard passed, the dogmans would not go away. Who would pay for their extermination? A delicate topic, no doubt. A girl rose from the table and quietly left the small tavern hall. She climbed the slippery wooden stairs onto the town wall, along which a patrol strolled, bundled in warm winter coats, only slits for their eyes exposed. They held torches, their hands near the crossbow stocks, ready to shoot at any moment. The snowy dogmans wouldn't climb the wall, but every year they tried. Tonight there were indeed many. The horse's bloody carcass attracted another dozen beasts. By morning, there would be more, and then they would leave. They couldn't stand the sunlight, preferring to hunt at dusk or dawn. Leaning over the wall, she stared down, exposing her face to the cold snow whirlwinds. Dressed inadequately for the weather, just a short black cloak, leather pants with a light scarf wrapped around her neck, and warm, fur-lined boots. Not suitable for such winter, but was she cold? A pink blush on her cheeks, warm breath, and fingers under which the snow melted. "Hey, get off the roof. If you slip, we won't catch you," a young shaggy patrolman yelled, lifting a warm cloth from his face. The girl turned and stared at the guy unblinkingly. He choked on his prepared words, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. She was beautiful. Young and slender, unlike the town women, hardened by the heavy winter work. She had long red hair reaching her waist, thin eyebrows, large, almost colorless gray eyes with a black rim, sensual lips, and a straight, calm gaze. She smiled at him without saying a word. "You'll freeze, fool," the young man's 40-year-old partner muttered. "Why can't you stay in the house?" "Mara," a resonant voice called from somewhere below. The girl laughed and then ran down the stairs. "Damn, she's one of them," the man exclaimed in amazement, then spat. "You shouldn't be looking at her like that, Joe. She came with those merchants. She might be dangerous." "I don't think so. It's clear what the others are like, but she's different," Joe confidently replied. "Love-struck fool. Wait until she sinks her teeth into your neck. Or will you offer it yourself? I've heard some local fools offered their necks to their leader for trinkets," the man sneered, then looked into the darkness beyond the wall and grimaced. "Sometimes you don't know what's worse. Those beasts outside or those we let in the night before last." They felt the blizzard coming, but they didn't leave. Joe reasonably confirmed his partner's words. "Maybe there's a sorcerer among them. I don't know. I don't like them. Sometimes I think they're to blame for everything," the man pondered. "Don't say that. It's dangerous," Joe warned him. "Yeah." The man waved his hand, closing the topic and turning around. "Let's do another round. One more hour of duty and we can go back to the warmth. Mara, you shouldn't walk alone," the man said calmly, extending his hand to the girl. "First, you know I'm perfectly safe," she remarked carelessly, then focused instantly. "There are about 30 of them." "Quite a lot." The man sighed heavily, confirming her words. Bright, almost yellow eyes tirelessly scanned the courtyard and the narrow alley where they stood. The man slung his long black and white streaked hair over his shoulder and gripped the girl's delicate hand tighter. "Do you think the blizzard will hold us here for long?" the girl asked. "At least a week. During that time, the snowy dogmans will multiply," the man confirmed her fears. "The town leader will ask for our help, offer a solid reward and his men to assist. But it will be useless. We're all going to get killed." "Quite a predicament, isn't it?" Mara smiled. "Time to leave?" "First, we'll demand payment, stock up on provisions and other necessities. The next town is 15 days away by horse. Who knows when we'll reach it?" "Yes." The girl nodded in agreement, accepting the elder's plan. "We need to inform the others. Are you going to see the town leader?" The man nodded. and they parted ways. The crystal-clear morning silence hung in the air like a light twilight haze. The sun rose over the houses, pink from the dawn. The town slept, cradling more than 200 lonely souls. The frost painted cold patterns on the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster's morning crow echoed. The town slept. Every resident was cozily nestled in their homes, in their rooms, wrapped in warm blankets, cuddling to preserve warmth. Sweet dreams, serene and simple. The town was at peace. It was young and strong. Youthful blood ran through its veins, confident in the fortress walls. How foolish this confidence of youth, unarmored by the knowledge of old, and how blind the old-timers of the past era, unaware of what could happen. They were all here, lucky ones, fortunate ones, pampered by fate. Like many other fortress towns, they were simply lucky to build walls around the former prison of the past world in time. This fortress was built on the fortress of the previous era. It once prevented escape. Now it protected those inside from what lay beyond its walls. The morning patrol silently wandered the streets. They wrapped themselves in their coats, slightly squinting their eyes, enjoying the crisp dawn silence, not noticing how the creaking snow underfoot gradually turned crimson. Only with eyes wide open did the men realize they were standing before the remains of a person, still steaming in the cold. The town slept, savoring its last quiet morning. "What do you think it was?" Third asked Mara. "Third, what do you think?" The girl concentrated, throwing a set of small knives at a crookedly placed wooden post. "Could one of those creatures have gotten into the town?" "Yeah, hard to sense with them crowding around the walls." The second girl nodded, pulling the knives from the post and tossing them back. "Maybe one of those beasts did slip into the town. But where there's one, there are others. We need to get out of here while we can. If even one creature is here, the whole town will soon be infected. And then panic and paranoia. We better not stay here," Mara mused. "Second." A commanding voice from behind made the girl turn around. The man nodded his head, signaling her to follow him. "So, what is it?" she asked, unable to bear the silence after a moment. "We're taking the job," the man confirmed the girl's fears in an expressionless voice. "We have no other choice. They won't let us leave the town, right?" She had considered this option. "They think one of us did it, don't they?" "Yes, you are always right, Mara." Fourth inspected the crime scene today. It wasn't a snowy dog man. Looks like the work of a beast. Maybe a werewolf? I don't know. We'll figure it out. They pay well, plus the merchant will give us a share of the deceased's portion if we help deal with the snowy dogmans. "Al," the girl reproachfully said, freezing in place. "We're not merchant guards. We're mercenaries. So what the hell? If we take this case, we'll all die. And there are others waiting for us in the next town." "That's why you're second," the first laughed. "And I'm the first. We'll kill the beast, claim the most valuable share of the merchants, and leave. That's more like a plan. But why so? Why not leave now? They suspect us, so they won't just let us go. Let them think we're honest rather than striving to make us dead, got it?" The girl reluctantly nodded. At sunset, another murder occurred, even more brutal than the previous one. The first victim was a doctor, one of those who examined the newcomers. The second was one of the merchants. He was torn apart when he stepped outside to relieve himself and get some fresh air after celebrating their survival. He was ripped in half, his head torn off and thrown into the stable. The beast was insane but possessed intelligence, ruling out true werewolves and ordinary animals. Fourth compiled lists of the newcomers. He interrogated the patrols, examined the tracks with third, and concluded that the one doing this was from the merchant group. There were only 20 people left in the group, including the guards. 4 merchant families and a pregnant woman who decided to stay in the town, knowing she had nowhere else to go. Here she could hope to get a job and a place to live. The remnants of her husband's share would be enough to live on for a while, and maybe she would find a new husband, start a household, and occasionally remember her savior. The merchants were carrying wool, fabrics, and shoes from the north. A good steady income if not for the dangers along the way. 7 hired guards, and each merchant with their eldest sons wielded swords and crossbows, as did the women who dared to travel with their husbands. Evredeka was not the wife of the dead merchant at the start of the journey. She had run away with him from her family, who wanted to marry her off not for love. She became pregnant by another man, and then fled with a visiting merchant. He couldn't resist the beauty of the young girl and didn't pay attention to her belly. He took her with him, and they married along the way. The unfortunate fate of Evredeka, losing loved ones one after another. The first family consisted of 4 people. The head of the family, Paul Rothert, his wife Kelly, their eldest son Ben, and the youngest, Clementine, a beautiful 16-year-old daughter. This was a strong, united family. Paul was the caravan leader, the eldest, receiving a percentage of the shares from other members. It was through him that all contacts with suppliers went. A confident and strong man, he was leading the caravan for the last time, deciding to send his deputy next time. He planned to settle in the southern town they were heading to and run things from there. His children had grown up. It was time for his son to take over and his daughter to get married. A candidate had been chosen long ago. It was the son of Paul's close friend, another merchant from the group. This merchant was named Derek Hellmark, and his son was Mel. Both looked frightening, swarthy with a hint of Eastern blood. Both conducted their business not entirely honestly, but Paul was satisfied with Mel's business acumen, convinced that he was the best match for his daughter. The Hellmarks were newcomers, having appeared in Paul's hometown 7 years ago. Derek's wife had died before he joined Paul's caravan. Once he had joined Paul as a guard, then they became friends, and when Derek saved enough money to buy wool, he became a caravan member. They were cunning, resourceful father and son, confidently moving towards their goal. Their rivals for the caravan leader's favor were the Lisoy family, Carl and Eugenia with their son August. Carl had been in the same group of survivors with Paul in the early years after the end of the world. He believed that this was enough to not pay a percentage for Paul's referrals, and he was genuinely surprised that his old friend did not treat him any differently from the others. Over the years, this resentment grew, and now Carl planned to intercept Paul's contacts, depriving him of leadership to become the head of the caravan himself. His shrewish wife, who always thought the grass was greener on the other side, spurred him on. But their son didn't care. The boy was obsessed with travel. He sought to break away from the usual route, leave his family, and embark on a long journey. He was interested in the mysterious and dangerous York, where, according to rumors, real magic was happening. The last surviving merchant family was the Frasers. Father Gustav and 2 sons, Mark and Lloyd. The youngest son, Theo, had died on the way, as had 2 guards and a lone merchant who had saved his wife's life. This family was immersed in grim thoughts about their future. The father had already decided that this would be their last journey. As soon as they sold their goods, they would immediately settle behind thick, strong walls under the reliable protection of the town leader. They would find another craft and never travel again. During this journey, Gustav's wife had died. She didn't wake up one morning, and a smile of enjoyment was frozen on her lips, which didn't match her deadly pallor. The death of his wife, and then his youngest, most beloved son, greatly weakened Gustav. He was ready to stop, even though the merchant profession brought good money. The man no longer wanted to lose his loved ones for extra earnings. It no longer appealed to him. The second victim of the beast was a lone merchant, Kelvin Hloon, a close friend of Chris, Evredeka's deceased husband. They had started their business together, so it was doubly sad that both didn't make it to the southern town. According to Paul, Kelvin was a good guy, deeply affected by his friend's death. They said he drank a lot and had a sharp tongue, but otherwise, he was a loyal fellow. And finally, the guards, hired in different towns along the caravan's route, all by recommendations from Paul's acquaintances and friends. Among them were a tracker, a hunter, and 5 simple guys with strong muscles, not knowing where to apply their skills. They traveled with caravans, dreaming of opening a hotel, tavern, or something like that with the money they earned. Standard dreams for troubled souls. August wanted to leave with 2 guards after the journey, who planned to head towards York, where they were promised a good job. Fourth of Mara's group carefully studied the merchant caravan, trying to understand what was wrong. On the one hand, you can't immediately accuse the caravan members of murder. Coincidences sometimes happen, but Fourth instinctively felt that the beast was somehow connected to the main core of the caravan. He suspected everyone, analyzing their behavior and connections within the group. He also questioned the doctors who examined the merchants, hoping to find some clue. So far, everything was fruitless. An ordinary caravan of brave souls, making good money in these tough times. "How are you?" Mara, sitting on the bed, was braiding her hair into 2 braids. Staring straight ahead, she thoughtfully bit her lower lip, sifting through her memories. She was mentally arranging her next moves, trying to establish the correct order of actions. There was a lot of work ahead. "I'm fine. I'll get dressed and go on duty. I think I'll get lucky." "Why are you so sure about that?" Running his hand along the girl's bare back, the man asked with a smirk. "Because I'm always lucky." Second turned and glanced sideways at the man in her bed. "We'll manage, Al." "No one doubts that." The quiet, snowy night was torn apart by a woman's scream. The girl took a cautious breath, rolled her shoulders, and then rushed towards the source of the scream. Fourth was heading to the spot from the other direction. They emerged simultaneously onto a small, round square with a drinking fountain in the center. They were too late. Second snorted in disappointment and approached the fountain. Filled with blood and entrails, in the light of the incomplete moon, black and gurgling, it frightened a trembling girl sitting in the snow. "Did you see who did this?" Fourth asked, kneeling next to her. "Hey? Can you hear me?" "Don't," Mara warned. "Hypnosis is forbidden in cities, remember?" It was a monster. Finally, the young girl spoke, staring mesmerized at the fountain reflecting a bloody green hue. With bright purple eyes, white shiny fur, it looked right at me, and then disappeared with what was left of Lloyd. "Come on, get up." Mara pushed Fourth aside, understanding that his glowing vampire eyes would scare the girl, and she might fall silent out of fear. Second lifted the frightened girl to her feet, shrugged off her coat, and threw it over the girl's fur coat, which was covered in cold sweat from the adrenaline rush. "She needs to be taken to warmth," Mara said, holding the girl to her chest, looking at Fourth. "You need to report to the human patrols about what happened here." I remember there's a small tavern nearby. Hopefully the owners are still awake. I agree. That's what we'll do. Hey girl, what's your name? Are you from the newcomers? Who are your parents? I'm Clementine. My father is the head of the caravan. The girl sniffed and then looked straight at him. You're a vampire, right? The man smiled at the girl's question. He remembered a time when such questions would have been considered a sign of madness. Back then, people didn't believe in the supernatural, considering vampires and other creatures a myth. Now, after the end of the world, supernatural beings had become a reality. No one would be surprised by a mercenary squad consisting of vampires or werewolves. Such squads were even more trusted, as they possessed significant physical and mental strength, capable of taking down snowy dogmans with their bare hands, unlike humans. Oh, traces of well-justified prejudices still lingered in the air, causing people to avoid supernaturals, suspecting that such proximity brought no good. However, each city had its own laws. In some, supernatural beings ruled, others belonged to humans. Each fortress city decided independently how to live, and often these decisions determined their survival. Yes, Clementine, I'm a vampire. He nodded with a smile. Cool. The girl returned the vampire's smile. I hope you'll kill the beast that did this to Lloyd. Be sure of it. Mara nodded, leading the girl away from the square. Clementine, tell me what happened. Second asked when they found themselves in the warm, common room of the tavern. The owners had already gone to bed, but once they heard what happened, they let the girls in, prepared a snack, and hot herbal tea for Clementine. Just Tina, the girl said, grimacing as she turned red from the tea. Clementine is a stupid name. It doesn't suit me at all. All right, Tina. What happened in the square? Our families were settled in different places. The girl started, looking at the fire in the fireplace. Lloyd and I have been friends for a long time and agreed to meet after dinner. It's not that late. Back where we're from, all the fun starts at this time. But here the city felt dead. We wanted to take a walk to the wall, see what was happening on the other side, and then go home. But there was such a blizzard outside. I couldn't see anything. I was feeling my way around. Lucky we were settled nearby, or I would have gotten lost for sure. I stepped away for a moment. The girl hesitated, embarrassed to say she went to the bathroom. When I came back, you know, blood is well visible on white snow even at night. The moon allowed me to see through the snow cover, and I saw it. The beast. It stood on the edge of the fountain and was pulling Lloyd's guts out with its teeth. He was still alive. The memory stunned the girl. She clenched and unclenched her fists, but there was no expected hysterics. And then that creature saw me. What did it do? Nothing. The girl snapped angrily. It looked at me, chewing pieces of my friend, and then darted off into the darkness. Only a purple flash flickered and it was gone. Did you remember its appearance? Can you tell its gender? No idea. I told you. It was dark. She crossed her arms over her chest. That creature was huge with white fur and glowing purple eyes. I think it had claws on its hands and feet, but I'm not sure. I don't remember anything else. You did well. Leaning over the table and touching the girl's hand, Mara said, Tina, you're a strong girl, rest assured. We'll catch this beast. You know, it seemed to me that it recognized me, the girl said thoughtfully. Its gaze became meaningful, as if it knew me. Are you sure? Yes, I felt it. The girl nodded. My parents laugh at me, but sometimes I get these feelings. I don't know how to explain. It's like something becomes suddenly clear, even if it lacks logic. And sometimes phrases come to my mind. I don't know how to explain, but these phrases, They're not my thoughts, as if something from outside comes. And what comes always comes true. You have clear vision, touching the girl's forehead, Second said meaningfully. A good gift. Do you think I'm special? Tina asked shyly. We're all special because we live in a special time. But you have a very valuable gift. Cherish it. Okay, the girl nodded, then unexpectedly yawned loudly. Embarrassed, she leaned back, and at that moment the entrance doors opened and Clementine's parents appeared on the threshold. Oh my God, daughter, the woman cried, hugging the girl who jumped to her feet. Both were hugged by the father, and the older brother stood nearby. Their faces were stern, marked by grief, their light green eyes darkened with sorrow. Mom, you know, it killed Lloyd, Tina said helplessly, losing all her composure. Leaving the tavern, Mara took a deep breath and looked at the sky. How strange. What are you talking about? Fourth, standing nearby, asked, Gab, don't you see anything unusual in the sky? No, the moon, stars. What's the matter? Then where's the blizzard coming from? Why are there no clouds in the sky? Turning to her partner, the girl exclaimed, Doesn't that seem strange to you? The blizzard dissipates. It only rages. When it kills, the rest of the time staying outside the fortress, not allowing anyone to get out, Second continued for him. We need to inform first. Do you think he knows what we're dealing with? Now we know what the beast looks like. We know what it does. All that's left is to understand the reasons, and we'll track it down. I've never heard of such creatures. First shook his head. Maybe a new species, like those snowy dogmans. This is all very bad, Third noted during the general meeting. Settling in the guest room of First at Dawn, everyone reported what they saw or heard the previous night. The discussion of the events hit a dead end, as they could not understand what kind of beast was killing people. Dawn was clear. Pink and blue stripes dusted with white framed the rising sun. There were no more victims today. The beast killed Lloyd and then left, leaving the boy's disemboweled body near the barracks where the merchants slept last night. By the tracks, they determined that the beast transformed into a human, complicating their search. Previously, the mercenaries thought that the beast, although connected to the caravan, was a separate species, something like a Rakshasa or Luguru. But after studying how the beast killed and finding tracks of transformation into a human, the mercenaries assumed it was someone from the caravan. And the worst part was that this person likely didn't know what they were doing. Since they couldn't even guess what kind of creature they were dealing with, they couldn't predict the future developments either. We need to interrogate the merchants, especially the guards, Mara said, thoughtfully twirling her loosened braid. Tina has the gift of clear vision. She said the beast recognized her, which means it definitely belongs to the caravan. We'll interrogate each one, find inconsistencies in their words. That's how we'll catch the killer. Good plan, First nodded. Let's proceed with it. Meanwhile, I'll talk to the town leader just in case. Maybe something similar has happened in the city before. We might be looking in the wrong direction. Do you think one of us did this? Paul exclaimed, disbelief and a hint of anger in his voice. Sitting at the round table, the man looked almost angrily at Mara, sensing trouble. After everything they had been through, the caravan members reacted very negatively to the mercenaries' words. They wanted to stick together now, but the girl's mere suggestion disrupted the caravan's unity. Now everyone would suspect each other, and Paul foresaw that this wouldn't lead to anything good. What if it's one of you killing people? And now you're trying to blame us just because we're convenient scapegoats. The man fumed, seeking support from the two merchants sitting next to him, Derek and Carl. Gustav sat gloomily a bit farther away, not reacting to Paul's outrage. We've known each other for years. Surely we would have noticed if one of us was a monster. And our journey didn't start yesterday. If there was a monster among us, it would have killed before. Carl, a corpulent man, added reasonably, looking at the young girl with dislike. He didn't like having to justify himself to a stranger. He didn't know who she was, and it made him very nervous, constantly fiddling with a homemade cigarette. You forgot about Theo. The merchant Gustav spoke quietly. Without raising his eyes, he looked at his hands resting on the lace tablecloth. You forgot about Mary, my wife. Forgot about the guards who vanished into the darkness. And forgot about Chris, who died for his young wife. We've lost many on our way. Who says it was all by chance? The room fell silent. The merchants had plenty to say, but they respected their comrade's grief and didn't risk arguing. If you want to interrogate us, then do it, Gustav concluded, looking at Mara with eyes grayed from sorrow. And no one in the room dared to argue with the young man turned old by grief. Did you know the hell marks are incubi? Mara asked third. The conversation took place a few hours after continuous interrogations, during which the mercenaries re-questioned the guards, patrols, tavern owners, and doctors and nurses. They didn't exactly hide their nature from us. They just asked us to keep it a secret. Third nodded. So that's who killed Gustav's wife, Mara said thoughtfully. The biting wind whistled through the icy tower's cracks. There was no one there besides second and third. Only a fire burning steadily in the center of the tower, serving as a beacon for travelers. The girls were old friends. They often went on missions together, trusting each other with their lives. It was remarkable considering how they met. 2 years ago, Mara had been a lice-ridden girl in a torn blue dress stained with blood and dirt. Her hair was gray from dust, her eyes wide with fear, and her heart pounded wildly when she stumbled upon Hal, Gab, and Kat. The vampires couldn't resist attacking the girl, believing she was just a human. They were in for a rude awakening when the little girl managed to give them a fierce fight, literally tearing off Kat's head. That's when Al stepped in, halting the unfolding carnage. He didn't ask the girl her name or what had happened to her. Throughout their acquaintance, he never once inquired who she was. The name Mara came out of nowhere and stuck to the girl, along with her exact place in Al's room. Second. She was smart, cunning, and incredibly strong when she turned into the White Death similar to Snowy Dogman's. This combination, along with the vulnerability of her human form, made her a deadly assassin, able to infiltrate any guarded object unnoticed. Everyone was sure she was just human. Perfect mimicry gave her a resemblance to the creature killing in this town. Mara became part of Al's group. She was a strong girl who knew her worth. She never spoke of her past, and she remained silent on any questions, so it seemed she was hiding from someone, which was common in the tumultuous times they lived in. Just weeks after joining Al's team, she dyed her white hair red, completely changing her unusual pale appearance. Let Al decide, Third concluded after a minute of thought. For now, we're left in the dark. No one saw or heard anything. It's a curse. We're not the fools they are, Hal countered. It looks like they decided to deal with the creature themselves. That's why they're saying nothing. Sooner or later, the town leader will allow hypnosis, Mara nodded. So it's pointless and dangerous. A riot might break out. A gust of wind carried the girl's last words down to the snow-covered town. The wind grew stronger, throwing tiny icy particles that painfully pricked the skin. "A blizzard," Second whispered. "Finally, we'll find this beast," Hal shouted, then easily leapt from the narrow observation window. Mara could follow her friend's path but preferred the stairs, wanting to keep her abilities a secret from the locals for as long as possible. Once outside, she shielded her eyes from the wind, listening to its bright twilight melody of fear. Rumors spread quickly. Now everyone knew that with the blizzard, it came. The evening street was empty. Windows were shut, and the quiet hammering of nails could be heard. People were boarding up their doors to keep the monster out. Mara easily transformed, calling forth her second self, and dashed towards the foreign heartbeat. This was a different, wilder monster than the one stalking new victims on the streets. The heartbeat stopped, only to resume with new force. The beast found its prey. Second sped up, dissolving into the darkness. Third followed, also hearing the heartbeat. Fourth cut off the path from the other side of the town, and it seemed the beast would soon be surrounded and then killed. Mara stumbled, falling to her knees, hissing with impotent rage. The foreign heartbeat vanished. The beast disappeared from her radar. Rising to her feet and assuming her human form, she ran forward. Soon, Third slid across the ice to join her. This time, the scene of tragedy was a wide street near the stone wall where snowy dogmans were raging. Over the past day, their number had reached 40, despite the heavy bombardment from above. The situation was becoming critical. Soon it would overshadow what was happening within the town. In the meantime, a horrific scene met their eyes. This time the victims were the former patrol and the young pregnant woman Evredika. The wild wind calmed, revealing the blood-stained walls, steam swirling over the spilled entrails of Joe's senior partner. "They're alive," Hal whispered, bending over Joe and Evredika. "They're incredibly lucky." Fourth, seemingly hearing Hal's words, spun around and rushed towards the medical center. The guy had it worse than Evredika. His face was slashed as if by a razor. Deep cuts ran across his chest, oozing thick blood. The worst wound was on his stomach, resembling a powerful blow that tore the skin and subcutaneous fat along with the muscles. Third quickly ripped the clothes from the guy's body with her claws, exposing the bare stomach. "He might not survive until the doctors arrive," she said, biting her lower lip. "Give him your blood," Mara whispered. "Just enough to keep him alive, but still look wounded. We're not allowed to do that," the girl protested. "I think he'd prefer to get blood and live than die because of this city's laws. We need him alive. He's a witness." Mara argued quietly but fervently, swaying her friend to her side. "All right." The girl nodded tensely, accepting the senior's command. Then she quickly slashed her exposed arm and held it over the boy's body. A thin stream of blood flowed into the wound, after which Hal pulled her arm back and pressed it to her lips, waiting for the cut to heal. They made it in time. Meanwhile, the pregnant girl regained consciousness. "What happened?" she muttered quietly and incoherently. "Where am I? How are you?" Mara asked, gently touching her shoulder. "Don't touch me." The girl's face twisted into a snarl. She almost lunged at Mara, but then a gray shadow crossed her face, and she closed her eyes. "Sorry. What's happening?" "Post-traumatic syndrome," the arriving doctor concluded. "I understand that Breda can no longer be helped. I'm afraid only these two need assistance." Mara nodded, stepping back for the doctor. "Remarkable luck," he exclaimed, bending over Joe. "This beast barely wounded him. If the stab to the stomach had been deeper, he would have died from blood loss. Now we need to get him to the operating room immediately. or we risk blood poisoning. Get him on the stretcher, quickly." "I don't think so," Hal whispered, smiling at Mara. Vampire blood is a powerful thing, ensuring Joe wouldn't die from infection. The doctor seemed to suspect something, but chose to remain silent. After all, the guy would survive. Everdecca had sustained only minor injuries, just a few scratches on her face and some tears in her white fur coat. She looked older, burdened by recent sorrows. Fleeing her family, pregnancy, the death of her young husband, and now the monster's attacks. The girl was nearly broken under the weight of her troubles. Mara wasn't sure how to approach her, given her initial reaction. In the waiting rooms, Mara waited for a nurse who told her that Everdecca should not be disturbed for the time being. They had given her herbal sedatives to help her sleep. Confidentially, the nurse mentioned that the girl might not have long to go before labor, fearing premature birth. Giving birth in such dangerous times. What a nightmare, she whispered as she left. Mara encountered the entire Rothert family outside the medical center. "Why are you out at this hour?" Mara scolded. "What if that creature had attacked you?" "How's Dina?" Tina asked anxiously. Behind her stood a grim father and a frightened mother. Her brother stood off to the side, seemingly detached from everything. A difficult age in a difficult time. "She's fine, she's sleeping." They asked not to wake her, so visiting won't be possible until morning. "I'll escort you home to ensure your safety." "And you're our guarantee of safety?" Ben sneered. He had a surprisingly shrill voice, which Mara attributed to his teenage years. "He'll develop confidence and strength in time, just wait," she thought. But she didn't like the tone in which Ben asked his question. Staring at the boy with an unwavering gaze and waiting for his father's nervous reaction, he put his hand on her shoulder. She led the visibly shaken family to their lodging. "Do you already know who is doing this?" Tina's mother asked cautiously. "I hope either Everdecca or the patrol boy will shed some light on the situation by tomorrow morning," Mara replied, frowning slightly. "The creature is cunning. We can't figure out how it vanishes. As soon as we sense it, the beast disappears, leaving dead bodies behind." "Is Everdecca really okay?" Tina asked again. "Were you close?" "Yes. She's good, though troubled." "Clementine," Paul warned, embarrassed by his daughter's frankness. "You don't understand. She just has bad luck with men," the girl stubbornly concluded. "Rest assured, both she and the baby are fine," Mara assured her, touching her shoulder. "If anything changes, call us right away, okay?" she said as they reached the door of their house. "We can talk to Everdecca tomorrow, but for now, we all need rest." "You're so young," Paul said as the family entered the house. "You're not a vampire, are you? Why are you with them?" "This team pays well," Mara replied with a crooked smile, indifferent. "Who are you?" "Why do you do this?" the man persisted. "You're young, beautiful, with wide hips. It would be easy for you to find a good man, get married, have children, start a family, a household, your own home. Why work as a mercenary? Because my life will always be on the edge of a knife." Mara's eyes glowed coldly in the darkness, causing Paul to yelp in fright and quickly retreat into the house. "You shouldn't have done that." Al's calm voice sounded behind her. "I didn't like what he was saying," Mara replied emotionlessly, turning around. "We need to talk to the town leader. As I understand it, a curfew has been imposed, yet people still go out at night, unafraid of either orders or the predator. That's their right," he said, inviting her for a walk. "We'll find the beast. If worse comes to worst, we'll declare all newcomers infected and kill them. The locals will get the merchants' furs and goods. We'll get money and safe passage. These people won't go for that. Otherwise, we'd all be dead already. Mara shook her head in disagreement. What a starless night. Quiet and empty in the sleeping town. For humans, colors fade at night, turning the palette to black and white, occasionally lit by fire or lanterns. Mara saw differently. Her world was still dark, but its colors were rich, vibrant, much more vivid than during the day. This diversity made her night vision as clear as daylight. First's face showed concern. The team had lingered in the town, which would negatively impact their plans. They would wait for them, but they might lose valuable time. For the leader, this was unforgivable. That's why he hurried them, knowing the subordinates were doing all they could. They couldn't leave the town on foot. Now, with so many snowy dogmans, they needed local warriors. Their old-world weapons and experience fighting snowy dogmans from the fortress walls. Otherwise, they'd be stuck here. None of the team wanted to turn into a snowy dogman, so they followed the established rules. Mara, we have no more than 2 days left, Al said, stopping. If we don't leave the town by then, go. You can escape and reach the next town unlike us. They won't listen to me, despite being your second. She shook her head in disagreement. It's not about whether they'll listen or not. You'll take our people and bring reinforcements back here. And our plans? She grimaced in frustration, crossing her arms over her chest. They'll wait. We have all eternity ahead of us, dear, Al said, running his hand through her red hair. We'll see. She dodged his embrace, returning his smile. First, we need to catch the beast. Dawn found the girls in the tavern. Mara was having breakfast with local flatbread while Third was tending to a boy. Hunting was forbidden in cities, but if everything was done voluntarily without hypnosis, then for a fee to the city treasury, a vampire could feed. Usually, vampire women chose young, inexperienced boys who had no sexual experience. For sex with a charming girl, they were willing to do anything. And they didn't care if their partner was over 100 years old. Mara was carving a beautiful pattern on the wooden table with a knife, ignoring the disapproving coughs of the local cook. The girl, in this simple activity, was turning over in her mind the possibilities of who could be the beast. Simultaneously, she made small notes in her old worn notebook, washing down the morning bitterness with a cup of hot spiced tea with honey. A good, surprisingly wealthy town. It's a rarity in these latitudes, though it's located on the main route between Billings and Casper. Maybe that's the whole point. A melodic laugh came from the stairs to the second floor. Hal had convinced the boy, and now they were going upstairs. Apparently, she had already paid the establishment's owner. Scratching behind her ear, Mara stretched with pleasure. She loved early mornings. Very quiet, very peaceful. All the hustle and bustle would come later. Morning is the most sincere time of the day. No one can lie at 6 o'clock. The only thing is that few people get up at this time voluntarily. Finishing her flatbread, she paid the cook and stepped out into the fresh winter air. Tilting her head back and squinting slightly, she headed towards the fortress wall. She had a walk around the town ahead to determine the best escape routes. She was also concerned about the number of snowy dogmens. She cursed the unlucky caravan of merchants under her breath 3 times. Although they couldn't be called that unlucky, as with bad luck came incredible luck. If there wasn't a mercenary team in the town leader, despite all his mercy, would have thrown these folks off the city walls without a second thought, probably not even sparing the girls and the pregnant woman. And he would have been right. In such times, mercy is more dangerous than evil. No one to blame if everyone dies. Days blending into each other were exhausting in their monotony. Perhaps that's why Mara disliked winter, preferring the vibrant colors of summer. Cold December, covered in ice and sharp snow, irritated her with its sharp gusts of wind raging in open spaces, the damp air making it hard to breathe, and the short daylight hours, forcing everything to be done in a rush. "Evredeka, how are you feeling?" Third asked the obvious question. Paul was present in the room as an observer. Dina still belonged to his caravan, so the man insisted on being at the interrogation. Jo hadn't regained consciousness yet, much to Hal's dismay. She kept lamenting that she should have given him more blood. But Mara was pleased. If he recovered too quickly, it could raise unnecessary questions. "I'm tired." The girl, wrapped in a warm woolen blanket, looked shyly at Forth, apparently embarrassed by her large belly protruding from under the blanket. "My head is constantly spinning." "That's not surprising, considering what you've been through." Third tried to comfort her, not attempting to touch her, remembering what happened last time. No, I was told what happened," she mumbled vaguely. "I know why I'm here, but... sorry. I don't remember anything at all." "Displacement," the doctor standing behind us at the ward door whispered. "Such stress. The body couldn't handle it. It's best not to try to remember." "What is the last thing you do remember?" Mara joined the conversation. "Why were you near the city wall?" "I don't remember." The girl was ready to cry from helplessness. "I don't remember anything at all. I left the room to get a glass of water. I was very thirsty. I went out, and then everything is blurry. This I remember clearly. But it seems I talked to someone after that. I think I went outside, but I'm not sure. The doctor said I was dressed for the outdoors, so I really must have gone out. But why? I don't remember. It feels like the explanation is very simple, but I just can't recall it." "It's all right," Hal reassured her, although Mara guessed how frustrated the girl was. "We'll leave you to rest," Forth concluded the interrogation. The girl said nothing, just shyly closed her eyes. Her husband had died a few days ago, and she was already flirting. "Hormones," Mara decided. As they left the ward, they ran into Tina carrying a bundle of cucumbers. "Vitamins," she said with a smile, then froze, dropping the vegetables on the floor. "It won't spare anyone," she said in a quiet, eerie voice, stretching the last word. "What an interesting gift." Al appeared in the corridor. The Hellmarks were standing next to him. It was clear they had been talking quietly before our group from Dina's room disturbed them. "Clementine," her father scolded, catching his falling daughter. "Again? When will this end? An episode? Maybe your daughter needs vitamins?" the doctor suggested smartly, earning a disapproving look from the worried father. Mara exchanged glances with Al and decided to remain silent. People react painfully to the birth of special children. Although, according to statistics, there are more and more of such children each year. What a nightmare awaits us when these babies grow up and start using their talents without proper adult supervision. First ordered the other mercenaries to leave. I wonder what he's discussing with the incubi. Mara and Hal simultaneously thought. The father and daughter went to another ward, the doctor explaining on the way that he knew how to help and where to start. "Do you believe her?" Hal asked, pulling her coat tighter around herself. "She doesn't seem like a liar," Gab said slowly. "But there's something off about her. The woman is too calm for someone who's about to give birth." "Hormones," Mara reasoned. "They're human. Just wait. You'll see rivers of tears soon. We're lucky she was coherent and could tell us something." "Hypnosis," Hal exclaimed. "Could the beast use hypnosis?" That would explain why no one saw it and why everything happened so quickly. They don't have time to defend themselves. Why did Jo and Everdeka survive? If this beast is so powerful, it wouldn't have been hard to kill them too. And why does it always hide as soon as we get close? Something's not right here. The hell marks suggest it might be a striga, First said, descending the stairs. It's the most logical explanation, covering a lot of ground. Strigas can cast illusions, making them appear as anyone. A few minutes in the guise of a person in clean, warm clothes on the street, and we wouldn't notice them. This beast could be anywhere. They prefer cemeteries, but in the city, people are cremated according to the new customs, so it could be anywhere. The beast needs a quiet, secluded place, preferably cold and dark. Like snowy dogmans, it prefers to hunt at dawn or dusk. An old striga can control the mind of a weak human. Primitive thinking. And here's a good point. It loves pig entrails. Suggesting we set a trap? Third guessed. Well, and who's going to provide those entrails? An ambush at sunset in the part of the city where the food warehouses were located, next to an old building that used to be a prison. Mara positioned herself on the roof of this building, carefully scanning the surroundings. The sunset painted the sky in yellow, pink, and orange stripes, smoothly transitioning into lilac twilight. It was getting colder, the wind gradually strengthening, promising severe ice by dawn. But for now, everything was quiet. Something told the girl it wasn't going to be simple, but she couldn't predict what would happen next, so she lay quietly, listening to what was happening below. For the first time, the girl thought about her life. She remembered Paul's words. Why do you work as a mercenary? How to answer that question? Mara didn't know. She had no answer, nor another life where she was someone else. All she knew was the large team of mercenaries, gradually gaining strength and power to one day take over the trade routes along the East Coast. Her clan, what she could call family. She didn't want to know otherwise, but sometimes, when alone, she felt a strange emptiness, as if sensing this wasn't it. Not her choice, but a cruel fate leading her down the path where she met First. She liked the life she led. The girl understood that her clan wouldn't just let her go. She saw in it a belonging she constantly thought about. Being part of something, that was her desire. She didn't intend to give it up, but what was wrong then? Third came out to the square, folding her hands. The girl signaled the operation was over. What happened? Mara asked, descending. The whole group gathered around Third. Joe just died. A beam holding the ceiling fell on him. Didn't you hear the noise? I went to check and found out. The roof collapsed. The doctor says the building is new, less than a year old. He claims it was staged. Who would Joe, the patrolman, bother? Fourth grunted irritably. That's a very good question. Did you notice who's being killed? The doctor who worked with the caravan. Then the merchant Kelvin. Then Gustav's son Lloyd. And then the patrolman. I think I'll be right to assume these patrolmen were on the walls when the caravan approached the gates, Mara said, pacing the small square. What are you implying? We need to find out what this doctor was doing the night of the inspection. Then learn more about Kelvin. And about Lloyd. It's not a striga. I think this beast is quite intelligent. There's something wrong with the caravan. The beast doesn't kill randomly, but purposefully. We'll understand its motives and then find it. Time, Mara, First reminded her, agreeing with her plan. Everdeka, what can you tell us about Kelvin? He was my husband's friend. Not understanding the point of such a question, the girl shook her head. She had turned very pale after the incident. It seemed she would have to stay in bed until she gave birth. An hour ago, they moved her to a spare wing and posted guards at the entrance just in case. A small, dark-haired girl, so far from home among strangers, just before giving birth. One could only guess how hard it was for her. Her eyes showed how she struggled not to cry, to reveal her grief, to show weakness in front of strangers. Her white hands gripping the blanket, blue veins standing out under the skin, sunken blue eyes, narrow cheekbones. A foreign northern beauty, a stark contrast to the southern fair-haired beauties. "Tell us about him." Mara tilted her head, trying to show her friendliness. She didn't dare touch her, seeing how painfully she reacted to strangers. Mara had managed to get permission to talk alone, so Everdeka was a bit more relaxed than when Paul was in the room. He drank a lot. The girl started wearily, wanting only to be left alone. He spoke rudely, made crude jokes. In every town we entered, he looked for women. "Did he harass you?" When the girl fell silent, Mara asked sharply. "No," the girl cried indignantly. "How dare you say that? He was my husband's friend. He never once dared to touch me. Sorry I had to ask." Mara apologized. "Understand, we need to figure out why he was killed. Isn't the beast killing? Some supernatural creature?" The girl asked incredulously. "I thought it was a monster. We believe the beast is intelligent. It doesn't kill without reason," Mara said. "Dina, can you just guess who it might be? If you look at it that way." "Definitely the Hellmarks," Everdeka sneered unexpectedly. "They're the ones who give me the chills. An unpleasant family. If my husband were the caravan leader, I'd make him kick them out." "And why do you dislike them?" the girl asked cautiously. The younger one harassed Tina. Yes, Paul said he wanted to marry his daughter to him, but nothing was officially discussed yet. A drunken fool, I slapped him around back then, and the next day his father came to me, threatened to throw me out of the caravan if I dared to talk. And he looked at me so angrily, it was terrifying. What right did he have to behave like that? "All right, I'll keep an eye on them," Mara assured her. "Tell me, do you remember the doctor who was the first to die? Do you remember him in quarantine? Did he do anything bad?" He was loose-tongued, but otherwise an ordinary doctor. Like all of them. I've seen so many because of... And she nodded at her belly. "I think the profession leaves an imprint on the personality. Thanks for your help." Mara tried to put warmth into her voice, earning a grateful look from Everdeka. "You're kind, you know," she said. "Others only see my belly. They all know I'm pregnant not by my husband. And my husband and I were married for only a few months. Only Tina was kind to me, a young girl. She understood how I felt. Other women in the caravan avoided me. Chris said that as soon as we got to the southern town, he'd quit and get a job in the city. We'd live in a white house with a red roof. The money from selling the goods would be just enough for such a house. He believed in a happy future and loved me very much. And what happened? Because of a stupid horse, he sacrificed himself to save me. And now I'm stuck in this hated, wind-swept town with people who disgust me. You know what they plan to do? They won't leave me a penny. They say, how can I be a wife? Just a few months and that's it. I have no rights to the goods, that's what they say. And they dare consider me part of the caravan. That's why Paul is hovering around. He knows if I tell the town leader, he might rule in my favor. Yes, you can't tell this to a little girl like Tina. Everdeka was utterly worn out by her misfortunes. Words flowed from her, revealing her resentment and accumulated anger. But what could Mara say to her? Nothing. She couldn't interfere in someone else's trouble. It would bring trouble upon herself. She could only sympathize, but Dina needed more than that. What can you tell me about Lloyd? Mara took Tina for a walk. The girl was deeply affected by her friend's death, but she was interested in the mercenaries' company, so she deftly escaped her family's supervision. "He was a good guy," she said, biting her lower lip. "I was friends with him in August. The three of us dreamed of leaving the caravan, traveling, seeing the world. We wanted to do that, but now everything will be different. Tell me, did Lloyd harm anyone? Did he have enemies?" Mara continued, lightly holding the girl's shoulder. "Maybe just Mel's. That jerk." She pursed her lips, glancing sideways at Mara. "You know, my father wants to marry me off. To that Hellmark. How could he think of that? Did he do something to you?" Not knowing how to phrase it, Second asked, cursing everyone and everything for having to have this conversation with a young girl. "If he had done anything like that, he'd regret it," the girl declared. "No, but he was always picking on August and Lloyd. Once they ganged up and beat the guy, he tattled to his father. As a result, the Hellmark, Lizoy, and Fraser families don't get along very well." "And your father? What does he think about it?" "He says, 'The boys will figure it out themselves. We shouldn't get involved.'" The girl mimicked her father's voice. "Listen, do you remember the doctor who was the first to die? Did he stand out among the other doctors?" Mara quickly changed the subject. They stopped near the inn where Tina's family was staying. During the conversation, they had almost circled the town. Mara didn't dare take the girl too far from her relatives, reasonably fearing their displeasure. He was worried about something. "I think it was because of Evredeka's pregnancy. Quarantine and all that," Tina replied after a moment of thought. "I think he was worried that a girl at such a stage of pregnancy decided to travel. As I said, Dinah is a good girl, but she's reckless. Sometimes she does foolish things. She said she protected you from Mel's. I could have handled it myself. And she, with her belly, shouldn't have worried so much," the girl said, slightly embarrassed. "Okay, I should go. I feel my parents are worried." "All right. When you catch that beast, kill it, okay? Don't spare it, it deserves to die," the girl said, turning at the doorstep. "Why would we spare it?" Mara was surprised. Clementine just shrugged and smiled. Mara, less and less time left, dear, and we're still at a standstill." Al touched the girl's shoulder with his lips, whispering truthful words. "You'll have to leave the town, sweetheart. There's no other way." Mara stepped back, turning to face first, running her fingertips along the line of his cheekbones, smiling. "There's always a way. We just don't give ourselves a reason to see it." The man hugged her by the waist, pulling her close, covering her face with kisses, and gently laid her on the soft bed. "We need to isolate them. I've had enough of these talks. They lead nowhere." Second began the meeting sharply, like a knife cutting through the silence. "The foundation of this town is a prison. Now it's mostly abandoned, an old neglected building, only partially used as a warehouse. For us, it's the perfect option. We'll gather them in one room and wait for sunset. The beast is not only seeking revenge, but also devours its victims' entrails. So it will get hungry and attack. Then we'll kill it. Any questions or objections? You want to gather them all in one place. What will you tell them?" "They won't agree to that," Third stated skeptically, crossing her arms and leaning against the table. The inn they were settled in was modest. The mercenaries hadn't planned to stay in the town, and now there was no choice. The small living room above the noisy hall was the only place under the roof where they could discuss their plans without attracting attention. "They won't have a choice," Mara retorted firmly. "First is negotiating with the town leader. He already knows that the beast kills only caravan members and those who contacted them. The merchants will have no choice but to comply. After all, the leader hired us. Our job is to eliminate the beast and protect the townsfolk. No one said anything about the merchants. They are secondary clients. Our departure from the town doesn't depend on them. As expected, the merchants were vehemently opposed to spending the rest of the day in the former prison dining hall under the watch of vampires. When they realized the purpose of all this, an uproar ensued, which Mara had to quell by repeating everything she had told the mercenaries earlier, only much more sternly. The merchants calmed down when they brought in the pregnant Evredeka on a stretcher. "Oh my God, why her?" Tina exclaimed, running to the sleepy girl. "She's about to give birth any day now. Why put her in such danger?" The girl was carried in by patrolmen, accompanied by a worried nurse. "The leader ordered it," she said apologetically. "He allowed one nurse to stay and monitor the pregnant woman, but you understand." She spread her hands helplessly, indicating she didn't intend to stay. Her own life was dear to her. Mara nodded, dismissing the locals. Fourth was on the second floor where guards used to patrol. Third was at the opposite end of the hall. First was on duty outside, just in case. The mercenaries were confident they could handle the beast, so they weren't particularly worried, unlike the others. The Hellmarks were the first to crack under the pressure. Derek decisively crossed the room and requested a private conversation with Mara. "What is it?" the girl asked irritably, mentally counting down the minutes to the end of the day. Through the barred window, she could see the roofs of houses darkening in the twilight. "You know my son and I aren't monsters. We're incubi, and we don't kill like this," the young man said softly. Mara felt him try to use his powers on her, apparently unaware of who she was. "Then why didn't you act the same way with Evredeka?" she replied sarcastically. "How did you, being an incubus, manage to turn almost the entire caravan against your family, except for Paul? It looks more like a masochistic game than integrating into a human community. Care to explain?" "She's pregnant." Derek sighed, his voice filled with barely concealed disgust. "The incubus gift doesn't affect pregnant women. And Paul's daughter has her own abilities. Her gift of clear sight prevents Mel's from influencing her." "And that's all you can say?" Mara asked politely but sarcastically. "No, I just want to ask, why the hell is my family here? Our problems are our problems, but if this beast..." "Calm down. You'd have been eaten long ago if it wanted, given the caravan's sentiments towards you. Just think about it. No one likes you. But apparently being non-human makes you unappetizing to it, that's it? That's why you decided to detain us with the others," the incubus growled. Rage made his eyes glow. "If you think you can keep us here, you..." Mara was tired of the pointless conversation. She was polite enough not to dismiss the incubus immediately, but after he started showing outright aggression, she couldn't restrain herself. A sharp punch to the stomach made the man double over, and Mara grabbed his crotch with her fist. "Listen here, you little cherub. If you utter another word out of line, I'll smear you thinly across the walls of this place. Got it?" she said coldly and disdainfully. And without waiting for an answer from the whining Derek, she squeezed hard, eliciting a pig-like squeal from him. Yes, I got it." The incubus squealed, and Mara let go of him, giving him a kick for good measure. Her mood immediately improved. Incubi were strong only with those susceptible to their charms. Otherwise, they were too much like humans. Looking at the helpless man who had been boasting and threatening a moment ago, Second smiled, ready to get back to work. Returning to the hall, she saw the situation hadn't changed. There was little time left before sunset. People were nervous, but no one else tried to speak. Apparently, everyone heard Derek's squeal, and his walk finished the image in their minds, making them shut up and sit quietly. "How is she?" Mara asked Hal quietly, nodding at Dina. Pregnant, Hal said sarcastically. She's not in labor yet, but I fear it might happen today or tomorrow. Just a hunch. And the others? Quiet as mice. I advised them to keep an eye on each other. They're sitting, watching. Hal shrugged, showing the futility of the process. What's wrong? Mara muttered, crossing her arms over her chest. The last ray of the sun heightened the tension in the hall to the limit. People flinched at the slightest movement. Nervous whispers, gossip, angry glances. Mara thought it would be better if they all died here. The presence of people inflamed with suspicion was unbearable. No, 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 not now, came a clear wail, and Mara mentally groaned. Rushing to Evridica, she confirmed her suspicions. Her water had broken. Are you kidding me? She hissed without a hint of kindness. How can you give birth in such a situation? Sorry, the girl cried hysterically, clutching her belly. Hot water, a set of towels, a sharp knife, and a separate room. Paul's wife, Kelly, appeared beside the girl lying on the bed. Pressing her hands to her sides, she glared at Mara. Quickly, we don't want a young girl giving birth in front of 30 people, do we? Hel stood next to her, gripping her shoulder. Looking into her friend's eyes, she nodded. There was no choice but to compromise. Frost on the old, cracked glass. Cold and howling wind, drafts mixed with the screams of a woman in labor behind the wall. Mara sat by the window, staring into the thick darkness, breathing slowly and steadily. The girl was waiting, ready to spring into action at any moment, ready to fight the delayed opponent. Midnight was approaching. Some had fallen asleep, unable to withstand the tension. Others listened to what was happening behind the wall. The firelight grotesquely distorted the traitors' faces, outlining the harshness of their gazes and movements. Tina clenched and unclenched her fists, constantly adjusting her slipping shawl, never taking her eyes off the door, shuddering at every scream, at every word from her mother. Push. Occasionally she glanced at Mara with a strange, incomprehensible look. Not cold, but not warm either. The caravan guards were stationed around the perimeter of the room, 2 behind the wall guarding the women. I and the 3rd were in the hall, and the 4th was patrolling the area since Al had gone to report to the city leader. The weight was unbearable, but Mara held on, as did Hel, discussing the situation on the nearby lands with one of the guards. "Can I go to her?" came Tina's quiet, cautious voice. She looked at Mara pleadingly, pressing her hands to her chest. "My heart is uneasy. I can't stay away. Dina is all alone in there, no one close to her." "Your mother will take care of her," Mara replied dryly, nodding towards her sleeping father. "No, I don't think so." The girl shook her head, biting her lower lip. "It will end badly." "Do you think so, or—" "I don't know," she almost whispered, shrinking. "All right, let's go. I'll take you," Mara said more out of boredom. Passing by the Helmerex, she caught a hateful glance from Mel's. The girl smirked, a wide smile spreading across her face. Silly boy. Young incubus, not yet aware of what awaits him. Incubi once lived comfortably, enjoying all the benefits of civilization, while remaining in the light, but hiding their true nature. Women fell at their feet, giving everything they had, including their lives. Now it's different. Now incubi have to adapt, trying not to stand out, but at the same time finding their victims. It will be a long time before real large cities appear, capable of accommodating all supernatural predators. They all face war, old age, hunger, and a bony figure with a crooked smile up to her ears. Oh, how fun life will become if they don't start creating new conditions for the existence of all species now. At first, there was a scream. Helplessness empties, subdues, makes you an indifferent observer, watching aimlessly. No strength to resist, no strength to even scream. Emptiness, everything through the haze of chaotic, sluggish thoughts. And you lose the battle without even starting to fight yourself. As soon as they entered the corridor, a sharp, knife-like woman's scream cut through the air. Along with it, the sound of breaking glass behind them and the rising blizzard wind, lifting their hair with a snowy storm. Mara turned slowly, catching a purple gleam on the edge of her vision. Mara. A distant cry, a sob. She wanted to give up. Everything blurred before her eyes, and the girl leaned against the wall. Mara. A woman's hand swept across her cheeks like fire, clearing her vision. The third grabbed her shoulders and dragged her along. What happened to you? You looked like you were losing consciousness. What else? I'm fine. The woman's face paled. The girl forced a smile, then gritted her teeth, spitting out the words, asking curtly, "What happened?" It was Evridica. She killed the guards, Tina's and Augustus's mothers, then almost killed Tina and you. The beast hid in the building's corridors. That's impossible. She was giving birth. Denial of reality was evident in every movement. Mara seemed lost in her sensations, forgetting herself like someone who had lost their way. This happened rarely. Mara had an inkling of why, but couldn't believe it. So she didn't share her thoughts with Hell. I don't know who she was giving birth to, but it's better not to enter that room now. There's blood everywhere, the girl stated firmly, leading the second to the hall. We better hurry and get everyone out of... New screams made both of them curse through their teeth. Where are the others? Mara shouted, regaining her composure in an instant. I don't know, let's run. Changing shape on the run, awakening all the darkest and wildest within her soul, Mara rejoiced. Everything became easy and simple again. No need to decide or think about anything. There's an enemy and there are friends. If someone stands in the way, they die. The goal will be achieved. Mara loved her second nature. It had a true feline playfulness, unlike the ironic coldness of the girl. The simplicity of judgment, the swift run. It all lured her to dive into the white purity of her supernatural side time and again. The girl struggled to return to her human form, because along with the clarity of mind came the heaviness of the human body. Sometimes, gazing into the black night sky with a huge silver moon in the center, she wondered, what's wrong with her? Maybe she shouldn't have had a second side. Maybe they were meant to be together, one whole. But how did it happen then? Who abused her so that she turned into a freak, destined only to fly occasionally? Mara couldn't stay in her other form for long. She grew tired of the rage and ferocity of the other part of her soul. Fatigue drove her back, and Mara turned human again. The consequences: hunger, drowsiness, the need for sex. She always needed moral and physical release. But all these consequences didn't outweigh the thrill of feeling powerful. And Mara, time and again, transformed. Oh my God! Hell stumbled involuntarily, pressing her hands to her mouth. The sight was worth a vampire's astonishment. The first thing that caught the eye was Augustus, sitting and rocking back and forth in the middle of the room. Next to him lay the body of his father, Carl, his face slashed, a gaping bloody wound in his neck still oozing blood. A little further away, as if embracing, lay the Helmerex. Derry was right. They should have left. They were pierced through, apparently killed with a single blow. In the corner, clutching a sword and leaning against an iron pillar on the second floor, sat Gustav. He stared straight ahead like a corpse, but was still alive. His left hand covered his belly, and a keen observer would notice. His stomach was slit open like a fish's. You could see a corpse lying on its stomach nearby. It looked like Gustav's last son, but the head was missing. It was impossible to say for sure. The bodies of the guards lay scattered around the hall. They had defended themselves but were too slow to save themselves. And then there were none. "How could we let this happen?" Hel muttered. "Where are Ben and Paul?" Mara asked, surveying the hall. "They're not here, and neither is Tina." Tina stayed in the corridor. Hel quickly skirted around Mara and stepped into the corridor. No, you can't go in there," her voice echoed. "Where's my dad? Father?" The scream echoed Augustus's faint wail. The boy seemed mad. Mara decided to try talking to Gustav. "Are you alive? Can you speak?" she cautiously asked, sitting beside him. Gustav looked terrible. His face was ashen, his gaze empty, and his fingers clutched the sword so tightly they were white. "Gustav, we can heal you. Do you want that?" she continued, sensing the third behind her. "You can avenge." She decided to approach from another angle, hoping at least revenge would bring him back to life. It worked. "Evridika," he croaked. "She killed all my boys. Why? What did I do to her to deserve this? You advised my father to abandon her. It was your idea to strip her of her inheritance," came a dry voice from behind. Tina stood next to Mara. "It's revenge for deciding to leave a pregnant woman. She didn't belong to the caravan, but she was loved by your friend Chris. And this is how you chose to treat the woman he sacrificed his life for? To divide his goods among yourselves and leave her here? You knew the city leader refused to take her in. If she had money and furs, wool, he might have reconsidered. But as it was, you condemned her to death. So she condemned you to death. Your children, Gustav, laughed behind her back, called her camel's burp, without even knowing what it meant. That's why she killed everyone but Theo. Your first son was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He saw Dina's first transformation, and she killed him for it. Curiosity killed the cat. Wait a little longer, and she will kill all of you." The girl screamed, her eyes rolling back, and she fell, touching the cold, blood-soaked floor, letting out a nervous giggle. The girl turned her palms over and silently looked at her bloody hands, then raised her eyes to the mercenaries. Turning around, Mara confirmed Gustav's death. The truth hurts. "Well, that's a surprise," Mara drawled with sarcasm. "Let's go. We were hired to kill the beast, not to wallow in tears in the company of children." "Wait, my family, where are they?" Tina asked, suddenly frantic. "Can't you see?" the third responded with irony, surprised at the young girl's resilience. Pug-nosed with a wheat-colored braid and light green eyes, she was all hunched over with pain. Until this night, the girl hadn't truly understood what death was. She didn't want to see or hear others suffering. Now everything was different. Death had knocked on her door, and judging by the tension in her every movement, she knew both her father and brother were dead. She was completely alone. "I must find them," she stubbornly declared, seeing the understanding in Mara and Hel's eyes. "No," Mara hissed. "You will stay here with the boy, got it? A burden you're not needed." The girl recoiled as if slapped, but a look at Mara stopped any objections, and she nodded, then hunched over, walked through the hall to Augustus. The boy was inconsolable, but he did not reject his friend's embrace. His whimpering drove Mara and Hel out of the room. Where are the others? The situation made Mara want to howl, but she felt a nervous excitement, almost dancing in place, listening and sniffing. "I don't know. It seems something is wrong in the city." The third frowned. "It doesn't concern us. Our task is to kill Evridica." "Then let's find her," Mara laughed. "Drive her to me!" Mara ran through the storm and blizzard, cutting through the icy air, ready to take over the main fight from the exhausted third. They found Evridica quickly. The beast wasn't hiding. She was devouring the bodies of Paul and Ben in the yard, where prisoners once walked. Settled in a nook, she pulled their entrails from their bellies and almost purred with pleasure when they found her. The monster was pregnant. Blood flowed between her legs along with a sticky brown liquid. The monster whined quietly at intervals. It was sick from the food but couldn't stop. A white skeletal body, withered muscles, a deformed face. Only long black hair remained of the sweet girl Evridica. She was a monster with glowing violet eyes like a vampire, sharp rows of fangs dripping shiny blood-soaked saliva. Her fingers bent backward, the middle one curled and extended forward, ending in a sharp claw that left marks even on stone. "How did we not notice her?" the third whispered. "Because it's a demon," Mara replied quietly. "Rather, a demon possessed the girl. She was carrying a demonic offspring. That's what happened." And then the beast noticed them and let out an angry, strange whistling, turning into a snake's hiss, like a bird's flute breaking off in a snake's stomach. And at that moment, the blizzard hit the girls from all sides. "Drive it to me!" Mara shouted. The third, obeying the elder's command, ran towards her, and the monster chased her. The speed was frantic, almost identical to Mara's. But the beast was tired, worn out from endless running, now not so quick. The first seconds of the fight showed that Hell's gift did not affect the beast. The same could be said about the girl's claws. She just couldn't reach her. Throwing knives wounded the beast, but it regenerated quickly and almost didn't feel pain enough to be useful. So they had to dodge. The beast quickly realized it needed to avoid Mara, whose blows were much more deadly than the vampires. Besides, any contact with the girl's blood caused burns and pain, then weakness. The fight was ending, and Mara was preparing to deliver the final blow, hoping the third would be quick and not get in the way. "Do it!" she shouted, jumping and flying over the girl sprawled on the ground. The bones of her right hand fused into a sharp spike, and with it, she speared the beast's chest. It was over. My parents wanted to force me to marry. She was already dead, but the demonic blood that had been poisoning her body for months prolonged the agony of death. She didn't ask to be finished off. She didn't realize something was wrong with her. Her belly grew quickly, but not enough for her to suspect. Rather, all suspicions were quickly dispelled under the demon's influence inside her womb. Now she remembered everything. Her last wish before dying was to speak out. Mara, Hell, and Clementine with the insane Augustus were her last companions before death. He was old, fat, and bad, and he smelled bad. I don't know why, but he seemed slippery to me like a snake. Greasy. I didn't want to be with him, especially after learning what sex was. She frowned, speaking. The blizzard was slowly but surely dying down, revealing distant flashes over the city. Something was happening out there. Something was wrong. But it could wait. In a world where death was inseparable from life, people learned to respect it. Seeing and hearing the dying was a duty that might one day return to you. Too many died alone during the pandemic. Too many died one by one afterward. People learned to live anew. Then I ran away at night. It was cold, as always, but I was so angry. I was in so much pain, she cried, clutching her hands to her belly, to her unborn child. Even now, knowing what was inside, she couldn't give it up. I couldn't go back home, stupid. I wanted to die there in the forest from the cold. Wanted them to regret my death. Wanted to prove something. He was there. That creature with glowing violet eyes. I couldn't resist. His eyes, they were so close. He did something to me. Suppressed my will, but not the pain. And I screamed, tearing my throat in agony as he did it to me. And then everything disappeared. A snowy blizzard covered both the pain and fear and sadness. I forgot that night. I told my family I slept with some traveling boy in town. They believed, and that fat man who wanted to marry me refused. Said that who knows what diseases that guy might have had. And then everything became meaningless. My belly started growing. My family didn't love me. A freeloader, a nobody, and now with a belly. They hated me but couldn't throw me out. What would people say? They tolerated. Until I met Chris and ran away with him. A warm smile flashed across the girl's face. I loved him more than life. Didn't pay attention to what was happening to me. Accepted everything as it was, believing it was just a hard pregnancy. Starving hunger, I nipped in the bud, constantly chewing something, believing the child would be strong and hardy, that Chris would never regret choosing me. And then he died and everything collapsed. The traitors hated me. They were going to take everything from me. I knew I shouldn't have claimed the inheritance. After all, the child wasn't Chris. And I was a stranger, but I was pregnant. And they were going to leave me alone, condemning me to starvation and cold. To death, she screamed, tearing her voice. When Kelvin, who was my husband's close friend, told me this, something snapped inside. I broke and something came out. I killed because the child needed special food. And then I forgot what I had done. I washed the bloody clothes, mended and sewed. Didn't pay attention to what I did. That's how it was. I killed the doctor because he suspected something was wrong with me. I killed the guards because they didn't save my husband. And I killed everyone else because they were condemning me to a slow death. You spared Augustus and Tina, Mara noted cautiously. Tina was the only one who treated me well. She was the only one who cared for me, sharing my burden. I would have spared her family too, but Paul was the head of the caravan and could have given me at least some money. He didn't, so I killed him along with his wife, who realized during childbirth what I was carrying. That's why I killed the elder son. My revenge. Augustus was a good boy. I wanted him to take care of Tina when it was all over. You killed everyone, Tina whispered, large tears rolling down her cheeks. And myself. I shouldn't have run into the woods. I should have obeyed my parents. Everything would have been different now. She softly smiled at Tina, and then quietly slipped away to another world. Only after that did hell cut her belly open and decapitate the white fetus. The girl died as a human. After Mara's blow, her features became human again. Mara thought it was good to die being oneself. Where's Augustus? Tina's worried voice echoed. The girl stood with her back to Evridica, scanning the small courtyard. Augustus! Augustus! She screamed, and getting no response, ran along the tracks left in the snow by the boy. Tina, Mara hissed, growing increasingly irritated. She didn't like the girl's impulsiveness. Her hysteria over her family's death broke out sharply. She disobeyed Mara's orders, pretending not to understand what was being said. Mara had to follow her. The third stayed behind, trying to determine what kind of demon Evridica's offspring was. What was this species? Tina. Wait. The girl turned a corner and disappeared from Mara's sight. Tina. A scream echoed, and Mara dashed forward. The blizzard had long subsided, the sky sprinkled with stars along with a crescent moon, grimly shining over the scene unfolding ahead. Augustus was pinned to the ground, and over him were two dogmen, tearing at the boy's flesh like paper. Tina pressed herself against the wall, covering her mouth with her hands, understanding that her scream had already been heard. One of the creatures lifted its bloodied head and hissed at the girl, revealing a beastly, rough, and very long tongue. "Don't move," Mara warned, stepping forward. For the second time in a day, she assumed her other form, thinking about Tina's luck. Only Mara could quickly deal with the dogman. Even the third would probably not have managed it before the girl got hurt. The speed was astounding, the air shifting like a breeze, and Mara was already behind the dogman rushing towards Tina. A swipe with her hand, and the head fell off the shoulders, while the girl approached the second creature, clinging to the ground like a frightened cat. Snowy dogmen always feared Mara. The girl never understood why, as other species could also kill them, but the creatures feared only her. It was all over. "I told you not to go far," Mara shouted hoarsely, turning to Tina. "I told you. Do you even understand? You almost got eaten by those creatures." "Where did they come from?" Tina's question surprised Mara, the most sensible question of all. Clementine held everything inside, hiding both pain and fear. She was trembling violently, but she clenched her hands into fists, accepting her life as it was. The girl didn't give up, didn't succumb to despair, and tried to think logically, even though the necessity made her sick. "We need to find the others. Looks like we found out why they're still not here," the third said, joining them. "I'm coming with you," Tina declared. "No," Mara objected. "Dear, you're just a human. You're a hindrance, unable to protect yourself. If I had come a little later, you would have been infected. If we return to the city, they will just kill you. Do you want that? But I have no other choice. If I stay here, you'll leave forever, and I'll be eaten sooner or later anyway. I don't want to wait for death. I want to live. I want to be part of your life, Mara. I can see clearly." She frowned, her face distorted in plea, her voice full of hope. "Believe me, I can tell you something about yourself if you want, but only if you take me from this city, if you take me into your squad." The third handed a short knife to Tina. "Cut off your friend's head and we'll take you with us." "What?" came the simultaneous exclamation from Mara and Tina. "It's a good gift. Tina will become a vampire and her gift will be enhanced. Mara, it's a good deal," the third responded. "Why should I do this?" the girl asked again, stumbling. "Otherwise he'll rise, sweetheart," she smirked, not taking her eyes off Mara. Cold and unblinking, Mara understood the reason. Turning around, she looked at the empty eye sockets of the black building, where so many corpses remained. Her soul felt chilly from the grim picture. They had completed the mission, but only one caravan member survived. Clementine, the orphan with the gift of clear vision. A cursed gift that had already interested Al. "Fine," Mara agreed, turning and meeting the third's gaze. "Tina, do it. We don't have much time. The city is dying. We need to get out of here before the snowy dogmen find us. If that happens, Hel and I will survive. You won't." The girl hesitated briefly, catching snippets of cries filled with pain and agony. She accepted Hel's knife and approached Augustus. Crouching, she stared at the corpse for a moment, trying to imprint his face in her memory. The last of her close friends. Tina's thoughts were filled with shame for the joy she felt at Augustus's death. The boy had gone mad, but he had been her friend. She couldn't have abandoned him, so the relief from the burden of responsibility was mixed with such pain and shame. She glanced shyly through the wave of unkempt hair at the two supernatural girls. Tina wanted to be like them. Strong, confident, unafraid of either future or past. She wanted to leave the caravan behind, forget the exhausting journey, the semi-starved life, and rare visits to her home. She wanted to feel independent, something she had been deprived of since birth, because the new era repeated the old path, and women would not soon have the right to decide how to live. People desperately wanted to restore their population, so now every girl was a commodity. Tina wanted to avoid this fate, and she swung the knife. The girls left the city through the path Mara had planned to use. The second led them through the back of the prison building adjoining the city wall and ordered them to leave while she tried to find the others. Alone, Mara collapsed to her knees, clutching her head, splitting with pain. It had always been this way, just not so severe. Any large gathering of snowy dogmen caused pain, apathy, and fear. It was an exciting feeling of a victim not wanting to defend their life, a foreboding of terrible pleasure, a connection between the killer and the ready-to-die victim. Mara feared her feelings, feared the excitement from the snowy dogman's presence. It was too much for her, quickly turning into unrelenting headaches. Overcoming her weakness, she rose and trudged toward the city. She needed to find the first. An unwelcoming city, gloomy and grim. The people here were warriors, defending their lives, but their strength wasn't enough. Sometimes, snowy dogmen roamed the deserted lands in packs and occasionally stumbled upon walled cities. Sensing the heartbeats of hundreds of people behind the walls, they gathered outside, calling their kin, seeking the slightest crack in the stone. The city was doomed. People would leave it in the coming hours. Those who were late would die and turn into snowy dogmen, moving in a pack to new cities. This happened if the dogmen weren't exterminated while there were still few. The city leader focused too much on hunting the beast, missing the threat from outside, and then it was too late. Mara moved across the rooftops, sensing 2 vampires ahead. They were fighting, defending their lives. But the enemies were too many, and Mara transformed for the 3rd time that night, causing waves of fear among the creatures feasting in the city streets. The girl reveled in freedom and the sense of superiority over them. Changing her speed, she leaped from the last roof and landed softly in the midst of the dogmen surrounding the vampires. "Mara!" the first shouted, and the girl dodged the dogman's claws to bring her bone spear down on him in the next moment. The fight was short, just a dozen snowy dogmen, nothing for 2 vampires and Mara. When the last one was finished, the first spoke. "Our supplies, horses, and reward are safe. A spare stable in the north of the city. The gates there got stuck several years ago, so the locals won't touch our things. The 3 of us can break down the doors and leave the city, but we need to hurry." "How did they get into the city?" Mara asked, easily moving to the run. "A tunnel under the gates," the 4th answered. "Those who built this city didn't think to throw stones in the ground, and here's the reckoning." "Efficient," the girl replied wearily, feeling her strength leaving. "Al, we completed the mission. The beast was Evridica, we dealt with her. But the caravan was destroyed. Only Clementine, Paul's daughter, survived. She asked to join our squad." "The girl sees clearly, doesn't she?" the first recalled. "Exactly." Mara nodded. "Good," he agreed easily. They both knew that young vampires were born easily and died easily now. Only flexibility and a will to survive at any cost guaranteed that the girl could live through her first year. That was right. In the first squad, there was no place for the weak, and there would be no concessions for Tina. On the way to the stable, they encountered only a couple of dogmen and a small group of locals begging for rescue. The first just sped up, ignoring their pleas. "We're mercenaries, not saviors. We're not heroes. We get paid for the job, and when the price is too high, we leave. Saving 10 people who don't know how to take care of themselves, don't know which end to hold a sword, a crossbow, or an ancient pistol is downright foolish. They're a burden on the shoulders of the dead city leader and will soon follow him," Mara thought. Leaving the city, the girl looked back only once. Over the southern part of the city, thick plumes of smoke rose into the sky. Fire spread over the warehouses, consuming the southern traders' loot. The second pressed her lips, burying in her memory yet another dead city. "What's next, Al? What's the deal you want to make?" she asked quietly, as the squad covered most of the way to the next stronghold. They decided to turn Tina in a month when they reached the city they called their home. The girl accepted the terms of the deal without a word and received an unofficial number, 13th. A beautiful number. "An army, Mara. We need a well-armed and trained army. The only chance to overthrow the king is to do what he hasn't done. To surpass him so that everyone turns away from him." Al spoke steadily. The squad moved along the snow-covered road. The horses lifted and lowered their hooves heavily. The snow was too thick and sticky due to the sudden thaw. They were lucky to find lard in the supplies, which, though temporarily, saved them from the formation of heels. The sun shone brightly in the sky. For the first time in the week they had spent in the city. The mood was rising, and only Tina remained sad. The loss of meaning in life, family, and all familiar hit her hard, so she sometimes cried at night. Hell assured that these attacks would soon pass. The only thing was not to interfere. The girl had to cope with her grief on her own, or it would fester inside her like a splinter, poisoning her life forever. "An army will allow us to clear the eastern coast of all supernatural rabble, including snowy dogmen." "A serious plan," Mara noted. "Are you sure it will work?" "We'll find out the day after tomorrow. I hope the sunny weather holds, and we reach the city quickly." "Ask our clear-sighted one," Mara smiled, nodding at Tina. "Tina, tell us, will the sun stay with us to the city?" The girl, waking from her half-sleep, nodded and focused. Now, every time she used her gift, her eyes faded, like a real seer's. The first considered this a good sign. "Yes, we'll be there soon," she spoke, then opened her mouth as if wanting to add something, but hesitated and fell silent. Her eyes regained their light green shade, and she smiled, trying not to look at Mara. "The journey will be easy," she said, earning an approving exclamation from Hel, the girl who would soon become her vampire mother. "Did you see something about me?" Mara asked when they stopped for the night. She led Tina aside, so the others wouldn't hear what they were discussing. Mara felt it was more important than anything else the girl had said. She suspected it had something to do with her past. No one knew that Mara was born on the road where she met the mercenary squad. Something had happened to her before that, causing the girl to lose her memory. She wandered the road, living moment to moment, knowing neither herself nor her past. She was all instincts, which led her to transform into her other form when attacked by vampires. That's when she found her voice and the ability to think coherently. However, she didn't share her story with others, fearing it would be seen as a weakness, and weakness was punishable. So the girl suppressed all her soul's impulses, believing in the squad's unity, fearing she might become unnecessary to them. Sometimes she wondered who she could have been. What was her past? What was she like? Kind, evil, or indifferent? Did she have family, friends, loved ones? A lover? Did she have a family? She hoped she wasn't the only one. That other supernatural beings like her roamed out there. Meanwhile, the girl went with the flow, integrating into Al's squad. She liked him. His swiftness, confidence in his rightness, ability to be cunning when needed, belief in his strength, authority. He was the kind of man with whom she felt free, equal. He never pressured her, but the girl almost always followed his orders without question. She liked to please him, and he took care of her when she needed it. "Mara, you'll lose everything," Tina whispered. She still didn't look at the girl, staring at the snowy ground. The girl frowned, stubbornly clenching her lips. She didn't like speaking, but some inner force kept her from stopping, making her say unpleasant things. "Understand? Again, you'll lose everything and find yourself on the road all alone." "How do you see it?" Mara asked cautiously, cold spreading through her body. Being alone again. How painful to hear this from a clear-sighted one. "I don't see it. I just repeat the words that come to mind." She glanced apologetically at Mara. "Sorry. You can't change it. I know that." She nodded sympathetically. "In the future, people will often say bad things because of your gift. People will start to avoid you, afraid to hear something bad, and others will line up, hoping for the best. It's a hard fate, but you can't escape it. It's good you joined our squad. Only by becoming a vampire can you become strong enough to bear the burden of the gift. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes," the girl nodded, furrowing her brow and coming closer. "One thing comforts me. I'm not you. Your fate is 100 times harder. How does it feel to be the bearer of this world's future?" "What are you talking about?" Mara took a step back, stumbled and narrowly avoided falling into the wet snow. The girl didn't answer. She seemed to have fallen out of the conversation in reality. Lowering her eyes, she trudged towards the camp. Mara didn't dare call out to her, fearing to hear something worse. The second turned her back to the others and stared into the snowy forest's depths. Tree branches, covered in soft snow, lit the ground white, creating stunningly bright winter colors, visible only to supernatural beings. Green, blue, purple, hundreds of diverse cold winter shades. This beauty fascinated, freezing even Mara's anxious soul. The girl pushed her anxiety deeper, pulling feelings out of her heart, leaving only strength. Only this way could she deal with herself and move forward. Only this way could she overcome Tina's words. She needed this. Alistair watched Mara, frozen against the white winter backdrop, and smiled. This girl deserved some solitude after everything she had to do. He smiled, remembering the past when he saw her completely different. Then she was weak, broken, crushed by another man. Covered in blood, unconscious, with tear-stained cheeks. A wounded little girl. That's how he remembered her. Now Mara had gained strength. Gained confidence. The ability to say no with a smile. A completely different person. Alistair couldn't believe she was capable of such things. And of course he knew what had happened to her and kept this secret, understanding that there were others in this world who needed Mara. Who would want to take her? You won't get to them, Leia. Because now you're strong enough to fight them off, right? He asked the wind softly. Alistair smiled, never taking his eyes off her. A perfect predator, the Lamia. The only one who could give him what he wanted.
Story 3.
We had been advancing along the creek's bank, carefully examining the ground for any traces or items that could shed light on Ethan's disappearance. For a whole week now, we had been searching for my friend and colleague, a national park ranger who vanished during his daily patrol and failed to make contact. As we initiated the search operation, we soon realized the vastness of our park and the daunting task of thoroughly searching it. Other rescue services, as well as friends, relatives, and volunteers, joined us, but so far, it hadn't yielded any results. A sudden rustle in the trees made me instantly raise my head. I recognized it as an eagle struggling to ascend into the air, its wings beating powerfully and causing the branches to sway under its weight. Continuing on, I kept my gaze fixed on the sky until I stumbled, barely maintaining my balance from an imminent fall. Regaining my footing, my eyes suddenly caught something glimmering in the water under the sunlight. Crouching by the bank and rolling up my sleeve, I retrieved a metal badge from the cool stream. With anticipation gripping my heart, I examined it. It was Ethan's badge. This find became a long-awaited breakthrough in our search. Excitedly, I called out to Sarah, who was nearby, and showed her my discovery. Her face lit up with excitement. Finally, after 2 weeks of relentless searching, we found a lead. Immediately contacting our colleagues, I informed them of our location and discovery. Then, together with Sarah, we continued to follow along the creek, winding up the slope. Reasoning that the current might have carried the badge from higher points, we carefully scanned every nook along its banks, hoping to uncover more. Our path soon led us to dense undergrowth, and entering it, we continued along the rushing water. The tree canopies intertwined tightly above us, casting a dim light in which cool silence prevailed, occasionally interrupted by the rustle of leaves. Venturing deeper into the forest, we unexpectedly stumbled upon an ancient Native American burial ground, hidden from the world by dense vegetation. The place seemed frozen in time, with graves engulfed by earth and tree roots. We cautiously made our way among the stone mounds, treading carefully on forgotten paths, when suddenly an astonishing sight greeted our eyes. In the center of the burial ground, in a small clearing, stood an ancient altar. Carved from stone, it was covered in moss and lichen, bearing witness to its unimaginable age. Inscribed symbols and pictograms adorned the altar, their meanings lost to time, but undoubtedly indicating its sacred purpose. Approaching closer, we felt a strange, almost electric tension in the air, as if the place still teemed with ancient energy. I glanced around for clues and noticed something protruding from under the grass. Drawing closer, I realized it was a torn piece of a shirt, identical in color to mine. This discovery alarmed me. I beckoned Sarah, and we decided to continue our search in that direction. As we walked along the trail, we carefully examined every bush, and soon we found a strange track. It resembled a wolf track in some ways, but was sized more like a bear's, although the paw shape was entirely different. What could it be? This find put us on edge, and we began to thoroughly search the surroundings. Here, we found items that apparently belonged to Ethan. However, they were torn to shreds, with traces of blood nearby. We continued our search in hopes of finding at least a body, but found nothing. It was strange. It seemed Ethan was attacked by some animal, but whether he escaped was unclear. We contacted the base and called in specialists. While we awaited their arrival, fog enveloped the area. It was highly unexpected, as specific conditions such as low temperature and evaporation are required for fog formation. It seemed as if someone had activated a smoke machine, and the fog began spreading through the forest. I looked at Sarah. Alarm was evident in her eyes, and I felt out of place myself. Suddenly, we heard some noise among the trees. Due to the fog, visibility was poor, but I distinctly noticed some creature darting past us. I drew my pistol, and Sarah did the same. We stood back to back, trying to understand what surrounded us. Then came clicking sounds as if a skeleton was clacking its jaws. After that, red lights appeared around us, emerging in pairs. I realized they were glowing eyes. Damn, what's happening? I thought. In all my ranger career, I had never encountered anything like this. The sounds and glowing eyes drew closer, the circle tightening, but suddenly we heard voices to our left. It was the backup we had called for. The lights abruptly dimmed, and the fog began to dissipate. We understood that our colleagues had thwarted the attack. Soon, a man in police uniform approached us, whom I recognized immediately. It was Detective Harris, who worked in our small town. Overall, he was good at his job. Seeing our alarmed faces, he immediately asked, "Hey guys, what's going on? What scared you like this?" We shared the story with him, and he listened attentively, though he couldn't hide his skepticism, noting how hard it was to believe. We didn't try to convince him. The forensic experts began examining the crime scene, cordoning it off with yellow tape. After a couple of hours, they reached a preliminary conclusion. There had been an attack by an unknown animal, but it remained unclear whether the person had survived. We surveyed the area, but no further traces were found. With time still left until evening, we expanded the search radius, but unfortunately, it was fruitless. In the evening, we returned to base, after which I got into my pickup and headed into town. In my pocket lay Ethan's badge. The journey took about half an hour. Exiting the highway, I turned onto a small street lined with neat houses. Pulling up opposite one of them, I got out of the car and climbed the porch. Knocking, I waited. Soon, a young woman emerged with a child in her arms. Her face bore the signs of difficult times. Dark circles under her eyes and a tear-stained face. She was Ethan's wife. When she saw me, hope flickered in her eyes, but upon seeing my somber expression, she bit her lip with pain. "Hey, Jess, how are you? Did you find anything?" She interrupted me without answering. I nodded, pulling the badge from my pocket, and recounted what we had discovered today, expressing the possibility that Ethan might be dead. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away with her hand and said, "I don't believe he's dead. I feel he's alive. So don't tell me that again." I apologized to her and said that we would continue the search. After that, I bid her farewell. It was already dark when I decided I needed to clear my head. I headed to the local bar, parked my pickup, and looked around. People were casually discussing their everyday problems. At that moment, I found it hard to relate to them. In the bar, I ordered myself a couple of beers and sat contemplating the day's events. Suddenly, someone sat down next to me. Turning around, I recognized David Harris, the detective I had met earlier. He also ordered a beer. We sat in silence for a couple of minutes, after which David asked, "Listen, about the stuff you told today. Did it really happen, or could it have been a hallucination?" I nodded. "Yeah, it was real unexplainable madness. For the first time in my life, I encountered something like that. Plus, Ethan's mysterious disappearance and the remnants of his clothes. You know, I never really believed in the supernatural, but this time, I even felt like going to church and praying. Understand? When faced with something inexplicable, you start looking for some grain of rationality, but..." David continued, "I believe there's an explanation for everything. You just have to search. I'm sorry about your friend, but someday we'll unravel this mystery." We continued drinking until late at night, immersed in thoughts and discussions about a world that turned out to be much more mysterious and ambiguous than we could have imagined. A phone call woke me up early in the morning. Answering the phone, I heard David's familiar voice. "Good morning, Mike. We've got trouble. Could you come and help?" he asked. I agreed, quickly got dressed, washed up, and without wasting time on breakfast, called a taxi. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the specified address. It was a farm with several police cars already parked outside. Entering, I noticed David and his colleagues talking to, presumably, the farm owner. Spotting me, David motioned for me to join him. "Something similar to yesterday's happened here. I'd like you to assess the tracks and listen to the witness, comparing it to what happened yesterday," he said. I nodded in agreement, and we approached the farmer. He was a man in his 40s with a thick beard, dressed in coveralls. Genuine fear was evident in his eyes. That alone made me worry. The man named Bill began to recount. I woke up to the sound of the dogs barking. Usually they don't just bark for no reason, and when they encounter something unfamiliar, the barking becomes more intense. This time it seemed like they were in a fight. I felt fear, thinking that some animal or stranger might have gotten onto the property. Grabbing my gun, I headed to the yard, which was shrouded in fog. With a flashlight in hand, I tried to light the way, but could see only a few feet ahead. Instinctively, I headed towards the barn, where the dog barking was coming from. As I approached, I heard a plaintive whimper, and then everything went silent. Continuing forward, I looked around for danger when suddenly a pair of eyes lit up to my left, and then another to my right. One by one, multiple glowing eyes appeared around me. After that, I heard clicking sounds. It really scared me. I started backing away, but the circle was closing in. You understand, I was terrified. I fired my gun in all directions, but the eyes started disappearing one by one. After a series of shots, I dropped the gun and ran to the house, managing to close the door behind me. Then something hit it, but I didn't hear any more sounds. Only those same clicking sounds. After that, I called the police, but by the time you arrived, the fog had cleared and I didn't dare go out to check. After hearing Bill's story, it was clear that it perfectly matched mine. Meeting David's gaze, we shared a silent understanding. Then he led me to the scene, prefacing, "When we arrived here and saw what had happened, damn, it really shocked us, and now you'll see it all yourself and understand." Approaching the barn, I discovered a sight that shocked me. Gnawed dog bodies, leaving only bones shining in the sun. But these weren't ancient remains. They were fresh, sun-glinting bones, seemingly meticulously cleaned of skin and flesh. But the scariest part was that they left complete intact skeletons. It seemed as though someone had simply sucked out all the flesh. Around lay the remains of 3 dogs. Nearby, someone exclaimed, "Oh my God, my dogs! What happened to them?" It was Bill. David admitted that he hadn't dared to show the farm owner what had happened earlier. We continued our journey and soon reached the cattle pen, fenced off with wooden beams. Before we entered, David pointed out the tracks, the same huge ones we had found in the park, resembling wolf tracks but much larger, alongside which were numerous small, thin tracks resembling those of birds. After examining them, we entered the pen, where a horrifying sight awaited us. Evidently, there used to be a herd of cows here. I counted about 25, but all that remained of them were skeletons, akin to the fate of the dogs. I glanced at the farm owner, whose face turned completely pale with shock. David approached me and asked, "Do you think it could have been aliens?" Unable to muster the strength to deny it, I replied, "Damn, after seeing everything, you can believe anything." The dog and cow skeletons, left without flesh and hides, created a scene that led to the most incredible hypotheses. I've already called in specialists, David informed me, surveying the scene. They should arrive soon. The problem is that such an attack could also happen to humans. We need to take some measures. We both stood there, shocked by what we had seen, when a team of forensic experts arrived and began collecting samples. Listen, buddy. David turned to me. This is some serious stuff, and it would be great if you could help me with this. Of course, no problem, I replied. I'll start my investigation. If similar incidents occur, keep me informed. With that, our conversation ended, and I returned home, then headed to work. There I met Sarah and told her about what had happened. This story truly frightened her. We sat, trying to figure out what it could be, but nothing sensible came to mind. Suddenly, Sarah looked up and said, I remembered something. We passed by an Indian cemetery at the beginning. Maybe it's somehow connected? I also recalled it. Indeed, if this is related to something supernatural, this place could play a role, I said. Perhaps you're right. This week I'll visit my acquaintance in the reservation nearby and ask him more about it. A couple of days passed, during which we tried to find traces of Ethan, but to no avail. The next day I had a planned visit to the reservation, but my plans were disrupted by another call from David. Hello, hey Mike. You need to come urgently. Something terrible has happened here. It's really a horrific sight. Come to the Green Street area, where concerts and festivals usually take place. It's urgent, Mike. Waiting for you, David said over the phone. I promised to come soon and hung up. Then I noticed that the office was buzzing. Such commotion usually only happened during major incidents. I asked a colleague what had happened, and he informed me about a massive attack at a music festival. Realizing that it was serious, I hurried to the scene. On the way, it was evident that an emergency situation had occurred in the city. Fire trucks and ambulances were rushing in one direction. Upon arriving, I saw a large gathering of service vehicles and many concerned people. Medical personnel were assisting young people who seemed utterly shaken. Passing through the cordon and informing them that I had been summoned by Detective David, I was allowed into the crime scene. The concert venue was cordoned off. Many police officers, forensic experts in protective suits, and other specialists were surveying the area. Approaching, I found David, who was in conversation at that moment. When he saw me, he motioned for me to join him and said, "Damn, this time it's serious. You need to see this." Leading me to the scene of the tragedy, I encountered a horrific sight. Numerous human skeletons lay on the ground without flesh, creating a grim and terrifying atmosphere. David explained to me that a concert had taken place here, gathering many young people. Everyone was having fun, unaware of the looming threat. Suddenly, the venue was engulfed in fog, which initially didn't cause concern. However, soon screams of horror and pain rang out, and panic ensued. Something unknown hiding in the fog began killing people. As he continued to explain the situation, he led me to a group of people sitting, covered in blankets and trembling with fear. The suffocating terror was evident in their eyes. "These are the survivors. We managed to barely get their testimonies," David concluded. Surveying the young people who had survived their worst nightmare, I wondered if they would ever recover from the horror they had experienced. David approached me again and informed me that 25 people had died, and this time, the investigation would involve the Federal Service. The dispatch of a significant number of personnel was expected, as well as the deployment of special forces, and even the possibility of mobilizing the National Guard for searches over an extensive area. "Do you have any theories about what this could be?" he asked me. I shared my thoughts with David about the cemetery and my plan to visit the reservation. That's a great idea, David agreed. I'll go with you. Wait for me here for about 20 minutes. I'll finish up with things, and then we'll go together. After some time standing by my pickup, I saw David heading towards me. We got into the car and headed west from the city, where the Indian reservation was located a few miles away. There lived my acquaintance Jack, who held the position of head of the local community. As we approached the reservation, we were greeted by vast untouched lands shrouded in tranquility and silence, against the backdrop of which modern elements sharply contrasted. Signs, small road signs, and modest informational signs telling about the history and culture of the local residents. The landscapes of the reservation were diverse, from lush forests to open spaces with low vegetation, creating a sense of harmony with nature. Driving onto the reservation, we noticed several scattered dwellings throughout its area. These were modest houses, combining both traditional and modern construction techniques. Despite their simplicity, the houses seemed cozy and welcoming. Around the houses, various utility buildings could be seen, as well as small gardens where vegetables and herbs were grown. As we moved through the reservation, we began to notice people going about their daily activities. Some of them stopped to wave at us in a friendly manner. Pulling up to one of the houses located in the heart of the reservation, we parked the car. The house in front of which we parked stood out among the others for its neatness and well-kept appearance. Surrounded by a low fence, it was built of wood, which gave it a warm feel. Around the house, various flowers were blooming, and there were 2 chairs and a small table at the entrance, creating a cozy atmosphere for evening gatherings outdoors. We approached the door and knocked. After a moment, Jack came out to us. He was of average height with a strong and sturdy build, indicating a person accustomed to physical labor. Jack's eyes were dark and penetrating, studying us with curiosity and friendliness. Jack was dressed in the traditional clothing of his people, which included a brightly embroidered shirt and wide trousers adorned with patterns. A band adorned his head, symbolizing his status in the community. Jack invited us inside and led us into the living room, where we comfortably settled on the couch. Within moments, he returned with a tray on which cups of fragrant tea were placed. "It's been a while since we've seen each other, Mike. Tell me, what brings you to my neck of the woods?" he calmly asked, pouring the tea. We shared with him the story of the incidents in the city and mentioned the Indian cemetery. Jack listened attentively and, with a sigh of surprise, remarked, "It really sounds like something supernatural." Then he pondered something. "Tell me, what do you think? Could this be connected to the cemetery? Or perhaps you know some myths on this topic?" I asked him. He paused for a moment, scratching his chin, and replied, "There is one legend that could explain what's happening, although I'm not sure if it's directly related to the cemetery. Just listen." And then he began to tell his story. In ancient times, when the lands were young and the forests were dense among the Indian people, there was a legend of the great wolf spirit, known as Manitou Wanderer. It was said that he roamed the world between the living and the dead, governing the souls of those who had already departed earthly paths. Manitou Wanderer was the guardian of order between the worlds, but his power was dual, just like himself. Once, the world of the living and the world of spirits collided due to a rupture created by human greed and disrespect for nature. This rupture allowed the souls of the dead to return to the world of the living, not for reunion, but for vengeance and chaos. Seeing the destruction caused by this imbalance, Manitou Wanderer decided to intervene to restore order. According to legend, the wolf spirit possessed a powerful amulet made of moonstone and wolf fang. This amulet gave him the power to control the souls of the dead, summoning them and sending them back to the realm of shadows. But Manitou Wanderer knew that direct intervention would alter the natural course of things. So he chose another path. He appealed to the elders of the tribe to gather warriors and shamans to perform a ritual that would restore harmony between the worlds. For 3 days and 3 nights, the tribe gathered around the sacred fire, praying and offering sacrifices to Manitou Wanderer to appease him and restore balance. At the culmination of the ritual, when the moon reached its fullness, Manitou Wanderer appeared before the tribe accompanied by a pack of wolf spirits. The great wolf spirit raised the amulet to the heavens, and its light filled the rift between the worlds, sealing it and sending the souls of the dead back to the realm of shadows, restoring peace and order. Since then, Manitou Wanderer has become a symbol of protection and balance restoration. The legend says that every time harmony between the worlds is disturbed, one should look at the moon, and the glow of the amulet of the great wolf spirit can be seen, reminding of the need for respect for nature and the world of spirits. We absorbed every word of this amazing story attentively. Reflecting on the tale, I couldn't help but think that in many ways, this legend echoes in our events. Perhaps these huge tracks belong to a giant wolf. But then, who left those small prints? I pondered aloud. Turning to Jack, I asked, "What do you think? How can we defeat this creature?" After a moment of thought, he replied, "If this is indeed Manitou, then perhaps the key is the amulet he always carries with him, which emits his power." We immersed ourselves for a moment in reflections on what this amulet could be. But soon realization dawned on me. Here we were in the middle of the day, discussing matters pertaining to the supernatural, and suddenly the atmosphere around us seemed to be filled with a certain mystique, lending everything that was happening a surreal tint. It was truly a strange and unusual feeling. After finishing the tea, we thanked Jack for his hospitality and wisdom, and then headed back to the city. Upon arriving, we found that armed squads had begun to arrive in the city. It was a special forces unit, although it was difficult to say exactly which service it belonged to. David made a call to someone and then asked me to go to the outskirts of the city, where a military camp had already been set up. Surveying the scene spread out before us, I realized that the situation had taken a very serious turn, as significant forces were now involved in resolving the problem. Arriving at the camp, we were directed to the chief of staff. He was a typical military man in camouflage uniform with imposing mustaches. He greeted us warmly and asked us to explain all the details of our story. Listening to us, he seemed to hesitate for a moment, and from his facial expression, I understood that he was wavering whether to believe us or not, as our story indeed seemed incredible. Upon completion, he said, "I have taken note of your story, but we will act by the book. We will divide our forces and conduct searches of the forest by sectors." We asked for permission to join one of the groups, and to our surprise, he agreed, considering our affiliation with law enforcement. Summoning one of the commanders, a lieutenant named Smith, he assigned us to his command. The lieutenant nodded in agreement and led us to his men, where we were introduced to the soldiers and provided with the necessary equipment. Soon, the order to move out was given, and we, getting into jeeps, set out on our way. 20 minutes into the journey, we found ourselves at the edge of the forest, where Lieutenant Smith announced that we were to inspect a specific area of the territory. Together with the squad, we entered the dense thickets of the forest, where every step concealed uncertainty. The forest enveloped us in its silence, broken only by the rustle of our footsteps on the fallen leaves and the distant sounds of forest life. The soldiers moved confidently, but there was tension in their movements, as if they expected something unexpected to happen at any moment. Lieutenant Smith occasionally gave commands, regulating the course of the search operations while we tried not to lag behind, looking around. Our path was illuminated only by the rays of the sun, piercing through the dense foliage, creating patches of light and shadow on the ground, which added even more mystique to the surrounding landscape. Exploring every clearing, every overgrown corner, we hoped to find some clue or hint. From time to time, the forest would throw false clues at us. Sounds that seemed like footsteps or the rustling of something big made us freeze and strain our hearing. But each time it turned out to be just a figment of our imagination, fueled by our fears. Nevertheless, the further we progressed, the more intrusive became the feeling of an invisible presence, as if the forest were watching us, assessing our actions. But apart from this oppressive feeling, we found no concrete evidence of our purpose. As the sun began to set, it became clear that our searches had not been successful. We had explored the designated square inside and out, but had not found the slightest trace or confirmation of our fears. Considering that we had little time left, I suggested making a short detour and checking out the Indian cemetery. This area was familiar to me, so I confidently pointed in the direction, assuring that we could reach it in just half an hour. After a short deliberation, Lieutenant Smith agreed, and we immediately set off. The hike to the cemetery was quiet, only occasionally interrupted by the rustle of leaves under our feet and the distant sounds of forest life. The surrounding nature seemed to freeze in anticipation, realizing our goal. The landscape gradually changed as we approached the cemetery, becoming more severe and impressive. The trees seemed older, and the air was saturated with the scent of the past and secrets. When we reached the designated spot, the sun was already beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in soft sunset hues. Approaching one of the monuments, I noticed on it a worn-out sign in the shape of a crescent, which undoubtedly resembled a wolf's fang. This discovery made me freeze in the realization that this place indeed had a direct connection to the legend of Manitou. I turned to share my discovery with David, but the words froze on my lips when I saw the expressions on the faces of my companions. Everyone around started exchanging frightened glances, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The reason was the slowly spreading fog around us, which seemed to emerge out of nowhere and began to envelop the cemetery, making the surrounding atmosphere even more mystical and ominous. The silence around became almost palpable, interrupted only by our heavy breathing and the beating of our own hearts. Then, in this all-encompassing silence, crackling sounds rang out, causing us to tense even more. At first, they seemed distant and barely perceptible, but with each passing minute they grew louder and clearer, as if the source of the sound was approaching us through the fog. And then, in that flickering darkness, red eyes began to appear. At first one pair, then another, and soon around us through the mist a multitude of red dots menacingly twinkled. They seemed to peer into us, assessing, scrutinizing, causing every cell in our bodies to fill with chilling fear. We stood, petrified with horror, realizing that our encounter with the legend might have been all too real. For a moment, it seemed that time stood still, and the whole world narrowed down to this moment of confrontation with the unknown. In an instant, Lieutenant Smith urgently called for backup over the radio, his voice sounding urgent and alarmed. But before reinforcements could arrive, horrifying silhouettes began to manifest from the dense fog. First came a gigantic humanoid wolf whose imposing figure towered over us. Its fur was as dark as night, eyes glowing with red fire, full of bloodlust and anger. The wolf's powerful paws seemed crafted for destruction, and its razor-sharp fangs looked menacing enough to make the blood run cold in our veins. Following it, skeletal wolves began to materialize from the mist. Their eye sockets glowed with the same red light, and some of them had traces of flesh emerging on their bones, creating a grotesque contrast between the living and the dead. They turned their empty gazes towards us, beginning to growl menacingly. The atmosphere of tension reached its peak when one of the soldiers, unable to withstand the pressure, fired a shot. This shot served as a signal to the start of the skirmish. Wolves, animated by some ancient evil, attacked with unprecedented ferocity. They lunged at the soldiers, their fangs effortlessly piercing through protective gear, sucking the life out of their victims. Cries and moans filled the air, creating a hellish scene on Earth. I fought back, trying to protect myself and my comrades. But the enemy's strength was overwhelming. In that moment of desperate despair, David grabbed me and dragged me down the stream, trying to get us out of harm's way. We ran over slippery rocks, wading through the cold water that lashed at our feet. The sounds of the skirmish gradually faded behind us, but fear continued to drive us forward. We ran, straining every muscle, every nerve, trying to get as far away as possible from the scene of the nightmare unfolding behind us. The forest under our feet quickly gave way to the stream, whose cold waters enveloped our boots, making each step heavier than the last. The air around us was filled with the scent of moisture and earth, which suddenly began to mix with something cold and damp, foreshadowing the approach of the fog. And then we felt the fog thickening behind us like a living creature, eager to engulf us in its embrace. Looking back, we saw dense streams of fog slowly but steadily catching up to us, spreading across the ground like a blanket, concealing the unknown beneath it. The sounds of clicks and rustles grew closer and clearer, filling the air with a sense of imminent danger. These sounds emanating from the fog made our hearts beat even faster, and thoughts of being pursued by something indescribable spurred our steps. We ran with all our might. Each time it seemed that the fog was catching up to us, forcing us to give it our all, discarding all fatigue and fear. Breathing became increasingly difficult. Panic hung in the air, but we continued to move forward, hoping to find shelter, or at least temporary salvation from our invisible pursuers. Continuing our desperate run through the fog-shrouded forest, we suddenly noticed assistance. A group of armed soldiers in full gear swiftly arrived at the scene of the skirmish, quickly and efficiently beginning to surround the area. Their numbers were impressive, and they immediately engaged in combat, creating a new front of resistance before our eyes. In the midst of the new battle, my attention was drawn to a massive wolf, standing out with its power and ferocity. Around its neck hung an amulet, catching my eye with its shimmer even through the veil of mist. Realizing the key role of this amulet, I shouted to the soldiers to focus fire on the wolf and try to sever the amulet. My words found resonance among the commanders, and one of them immediately gave the order. In the next moment, hundreds of bullets flew towards the wolf, but they only glanced off its dark fur, causing no significant harm. The creature seemed invulnerable, indestructible. And then I noticed David seizing the moment, taking aim and waiting for the optimal time to shoot. When David fired, a sharp, piercing click rang out. The amulet around the wolf's neck, as if sensing the impending threat, briefly flashed brighter before shattering into two pieces. When the amulet was shattered, the enormous wolf let out a long, agonizing howl that reverberated throughout the surroundings, sending shivers down even the bravest soldiers' spines. Something incredible began to happen around it. The fog started to dissipate, and the wolf's skeletons, which just moments ago were full of aggression and strength, began to crumble into dust as if their connection to this world had been severed forever. What happened next resembled a slow awakening from a nightmare. Silence descended, only occasionally interrupted by the quiet sounds of the forest returning to its usual life. The soldiers, stunned by what had occurred, gradually lowered the tension until they ceased fire, realizing that the threat had been eliminated. As the smoke of battle cleared and the world around began to regain its familiar outlines, I saw in the place of the massive wolf my friend Ethan, lying unconscious. The shock of seeing my old friend before me was so great that it momentarily paralyzed me. My legs carried me to him, while my heart pounded with both horror and hope. The fear of losing a friend mixed with relief when I finally heard his breathing, weak but steady. Medics, quickly arriving on the scene, took Ethan under their care, providing him with first aid before preparing him for transportation to the hospital. It was difficult for me to look away from the stretcher carrying Ethan. My heart was filled with concern for his condition. It was several days before Ethan regained consciousness. His account of only remembering a strange sensation and the fog made me ponder many things. Local authorities and experts began investigating the incident, trying to understand how Ethan became involved in these events and what exactly led to such an outcome. Following the events, there were long and exhaustive inquiries into Ethan's role in these events. Questions of his guilt or innocence occupied the minds of many, from law enforcement agencies to ordinary citizens. People wanted to understand how an ordinary person could become the central figure in such an incredible story. The investigation tried to unravel the complex situation, gathering witness testimonies, analyzing all available evidence, and trying to link Ethan to the ancient legend of the manitou. Supernatural experts and researchers from different parts of the country came to give their assessment of what was happening. While some saw Ethan as a victim of circumstances in the wrong place at the wrong time, others were convinced of his involvement in summoning entities from the otherworldly realm. Debates about whether Ethan possessed any unknown abilities or became an unwitting instrument in the hands of ancient forces raged on. Ethan himself, gradually recovering from his ordeal, found himself in the spotlight, trying to answer questions for which he himself could not find explanations. His life was turned upside down, and he felt the weight of others' expectations and suspicions. Ultimately, despite all the inquiries and debates, no compelling evidence of Ethan's guilt was found. The story involving him remained shrouded in mystery, and questions about what really happened that night remained unanswered. Over time, interest in the case waned, but for those who had faced the inexplicable firsthand, these events would forever serve as a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, answers to which we may never find.